Everybody. I suppose I should say Merry Christmas. Where are we? I am having a typical, in typical Malone streaming style, I'm having issues with getting everything online. So for some reason, about 15 minutes ago, to unpack a bit of a sad. So what I'm doing right now is I'm desperately trying to get everything back online. We lost internet briefly. Is everyone still here? Put your hands up if you can hear me. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. And hopefully we're in business this time. Still chugging away. Mouse on a wheel. Mouse on a wheel. We're doing it. Oh, may the pot be with you. How are you? There's one in the room. That's something, isn't it? So I'm just trying a bit of a roundabout way to get into to what I need to here. A few more people starting to turn up. Oh, I think we're in business. Oh, what a mission that was. Apologies. Here we go. Right. Okay, so there might be a little bit of noise today. Everyone's home from school. It's Christmas Eve here in New Zealand, so it's the day before the big day. But welcome aboard, everyone who's here, and everyone who's going to start, who's going to be here soon. As I said, apologies for that awful start. That was atrocious. Another brilliant start. Another excellent Malone live stream. We are going to talk about the Rise of Skywalker. We are going to talk about it, but I thought we'd have a bit of a palate cleanser first. We'd get a few other things out of the way, and then we'll just open the floor at the end, and whoever wants to share about Rise of Skywalker and share your thoughts. And I've got two other things that I didn't talk about in my review that sort of dawned on me yesterday. I thought I might as well just talk about those quickly as well. So we will do that towards the end. But today is a jam-packed Christmas Eve special. It is Christmas Eve here in New Zealand, so some of you, I know you're a little bit behind. So we're going to talk about Christmas movies. I've got some of my favourite vinyl albums sitting here right beside me. Some people have been asking for ages, can you please talk about some of your favourite vinyls? So I've grabbed a swag of my favourites, and I just want to tell you why some of these things are favourites in my collection. We're going to do a quick fire movie review of, 7 movies that I've seen on planes in the last wee while. G'day, Rogue 2, checking in. Nigel, how are you? And so we're going to just quick fire through, review some of those films that I finally got a chance to see. When you're a dad with 5 kids and things are busy and you've got to you run your own organisation like I do, it's kind of hard to get the time to sit down and watch as much stuff. I just don't have time for that. So I thought we'd go through, actually it's 8 movies. We'd do some reviews. The Mandalorian, episode 7, we're going to talk about that. The Watchmen TV series, we're going to talk about that because everyone's been asking, can we talk about Watchmen? Yeah, we can. Now that it's done, let's talk about the mess that was Watchmen. And then Rise of Skywalker. And the floor will be open for you to share after that. So it's going to be a juicy live stream. First of all, let me start by saying Merry Christmas, everybody. And you won't hear me saying happy holidays. It is Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you. And also a huge thank you to everyone who has financially supported in the channel in any way this year. Really appreciate that. One of the things I've worked really hard to do is stave off the bean counters. I've had a couple of emails in the last 6 months from different corporations that want me to sell products on my channel, and I've just ignored all of them because I don't feel ethically comfortable shilling products that I don't know anything about to people on the channel. I'd much rather do it the old-fashioned way and say, well, if there's merit and you find entertainment in what I'm doing, please contribute. And a lot of you have done that, so I'm grateful for that. It's allowed this to keep happening. So thank you very, very much. If you want to contribute, there's a link in the PayPal. There's a PayPal link in the description below, and there's also the super chats are on as well. But thank you very much. I wanted to start today by saying a huge thank you to everyone who supports the channel. You guys are awesome. So with that in mind, let's dive straight into Christmas movies, shall we? Here's my list, and then perhaps you can share with me your ideas. I'm going to try and alternate my screen between here and here to see what's going on. But first of all, I think you've got to have on any Christmas list has got to be Die Hard. If you're going to have a Christmas movie list, you've got to have Die Hard on there. This is the great debate, isn't it? Is it a Christmas movie or not? I don't think it's strictly a Christmas movie, but because it takes place at Christmas time, then you've got to have it on your list. It's now earned its way onto the list. I saw a great meme the other day. Don't forget about that other Christmas movie, Die Hard 2. So, yeah, Die Hard's got up on your list. Home Alone on my Christmas movie list. Home Alone is a great Christmas movie. Our kids absolutely love that film. As I said, I think it was last week I was talking about the remake of Home Alone is going to be a waste of time and effort. But our kids love that film. It still stands up. It is still a great Christmas movie. And yeah, all these years later, it's still entertaining and still a must watch. In fact, I think our kids are going to watch it today. Sorry, excuse me. The Nativity Story. The Nativity Story is a bit of an underrated film, in my opinion. It's the one with Oscar Isaacs playing Joseph and Keisha Castle-Hughes playing Mary. And it just tells the Nativity story. It's a well-acted, well-made, that they worked within their budget, but it was a really well-made Christmas film. And yeah, I thought it was good. And one of the things I really liked about the Nativity Story was, because I remember years ago when it came out, I was invited to a special advanced premiere screening. Got an email one day saying, look, we're going to be, this new movie's coming. I hadn't heard anything about it, and we'd love for you to come and see it and share your thoughts with the people that you are connected with. And so I went along to see this film not knowing anything about it, and I really enjoyed it. One of the things I really appreciated about the Nativity Story with Keisha Castle-Hughes and Oscar Isaac is that it actually, I think it portrayed Joseph in quite a strong and new light, in a really good way. Whereas previously in nativity stories, the focus tends to be on obviously Mary and baby Jesus, which is the nativity story, so duh. But in this one, I thought the character of Joseph was a lot more fleshed out, and this whole idea of him being a protector and a father was really well. There's a couple of really good scenes in that film, so I really like that. Ernest Saves Christmas. You've got to have that on there. Who remembers Ernest Saves Christmas? Oh man, remember the Ernest movies? Oh, so Ernest Saves Christmas is on your Christmas. You've got to have Ernest Saves Christmas. The Santa Claus, 1, 2, and 3. I think 3 is probably the funniest with Martin Short in it. But my kids love the Santa Claus movies, and the reason I got them onto it was because I remember when that film got released, the first one with Tim Allen, where he ends up, he kills Santa Claus? He killing Santa Claus and inheriting Santa Claus's job, and he becomes this fat bearded white man. And I remember when it came out, it was such an enjoyable film, and so I thought, I bet my kids will love this, and they absolutely love it. And since we got Disney Plus, they've been watching the thing non-stop, over and over. The Grinch, with the Jim Carrey version of the Grinch, because Jim Carrey is just awesome in just about anything he does. And so, yeah, I really love him. For some reason, that movie just captures something about childhood nostalgia and Christmas for me. So the Grinch movie's in there. And one other for me on the Christmas list. I think a lot of families have, and someone's already mentioned it. Who mentioned it? Nigel Jones, the original Miracle on 34th Street. A lot of people talk about the Miracle on 34th Street. We're going to watch that this year, but that's not our sort of family classic, if you like. You know, families have their own different classic Christmas movies. It's A Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart, Frank Capra, one of Frank Capra's best movies. Phenomenal film. He comes back from the war after serving in the war as he's given an officership in World War II, and he's got all these men put under his command to create movie footage to send back home about the war effort, so people know what's going on. And he basically just went willingly, and he was one of about 3 or 4 directors who did that. John Ford was another one, and they put their careers in Hollywood on hold and went to serve the war effort, running film crews. It was quite amazing what they did. And then he comes back from that and he produces some of his best work. And It's a Wonderful Life is this film that gets released, and true to form, it bombed at the box office. It's a Wonderful Life comes out. Those who don't know the story, it's about a guy who ends up in a bit of a pickle, not through his own fault, but something happens, and then he thinks his life is not worth living, his life's been pointless, so he wants to die. And an angel appears to him on the bridge as he's about to jump, he's about to commit suicide, and shows him what the world would be like if he hadn't have existed, and just how important his life is, even in the midst of his suffering and everything else. Really, really good movie. Anyway, it bombs at the box office. It comes out. G'day, Drew. Merry Christmas to you too, mate. And it bombed at the box office. But then what happens is when they start playing movies on television, people discover it in a big way on TV. It's kind of like the Shawshank Redemption, but the Shawshank Redemption, once it came to home video, that's when people discovered it. And all of a sudden, people realize this is actually a phenomenal film. And so, yeah, It's a Wonderful Life, bombed at the box office, becomes this massive, huge hit, effectively, after it starts getting broadcast on TV each year, and people realize this is a really good film. And so for our family, It's a Wonderful Life. We're going to probably set up the big screen tomorrow night and watch it, and because we're hosting Christmas. So if a few of the relatives are still around, that's what we'll be watching. By the way, for those who haven't noticed, this is my Christmas shirt. This is my Hawaiian Christmas shirt that I like to bring out every year. My kids cringe at this, but I'm a dad, so dad jokes are my thing. I get off on cringe. It's like cocaine for me. Another hit of cringe. So so I love this. Oh, not that shirt, Dad. It's that time of year. I only wear it once a year. So you got a special, actually, I'm wearing it today on the live stream. My Christmas Hawaiian shirt with Santa Claus surfing. I think this thing cost me like $2 or something about 6 or 7 years ago, and I've been wearing it ever since at Christmas. So yeah, it's now part of the dad joke law in our house. We've got 5 kids. With each kid that I've had, my power to tell real jokes has diminished, and my superpower of telling dad jokes has increased. So this shirt is now part of that. Speaking of Christmas movies, I thought I'd make a second subcategory of my throat's a bit sore today. I did something really clever last night in preparing for the live stream. I thought, you know what? I need to buy myself a new hunting rifle. This true story. And so I thought I'm looking at a couple of different options, and I thought I'll just watch a couple of review videos online of the different models I'm looking at to check out accuracy and reliability and all the rest of it. And next thing you know, it's almost 2 a.m. And so I was like, I'm supposed to be live streaming tomorrow morning, New Zealand time. I better get myself off to bed pretty quick. And true to form, our kids wake up at all hours of the night several times, crying out for things they don't need. And so here I am, looking a bit worse for wear. So anyway, I thought I'd create a second subcategory of films. So we've got Christmas movies. So let me go through my list of Christmas films again. Die Hard, Home Alone, not in no particular order here. Die Hard, Home Alone, The Nativity Story with Keisha Castle-Hughes and Oscar Isaac, Ernest Saves Christmas. You got to have that one. It's a bit of fun. The Santa Claus with Jim Carrey, The Grinch. With Santa Claus with Tim Allen, The Grinch with Jim Carrey, and this is the big one: is It's a Wonderful Life, the Frank Capra made film, Jimmy Stewart. By the way, that's why when people talk about box office takings, everyone's obsessing over Star Wars and box office takings right now. I'm sorry, to me it's pointless. It's such a straw man because the box office takings don't tell you how good or bad a film is. All they do is tell you how good the marketing is or how good the hype is around a film. That's all it tells you. If the marketing was great and the hype was good, people pay money to see it. Doesn't mean that what they watched was good though. And if no one goes to see a really, really good film like The Shawshank Redemption, which bombed at the box office, like It's a Wonderful Life, which bombed at the box office, those two films are some of the best films that were ever made, yet they bombed at the box office. They don't cease to be good films just because not many people paid money to go and see them. They didn't fall for the marketing campaign. So anyway, that's my list. But here's my secondary list. I put together a list of films that I like to watch during the Christmas holiday period. You've got a bit more time on your hands. You're not working. What do you do with your time? You watch, you take some time to watch movies. So here's a list of 4 sort of things that are always on my Christmas holiday movie watch list. Number 1 is the Star Wars original trilogy. I try and watch that with the kids at least once a year, and the Christmas holiday period is a good time, and they're off school and I've got a few days off, and I try and take a good solid couple of weeks off because I'm so busy throughout the year. And so g'day Daniel, welcome aboard. Jose, welcome aboard. Observer Dude, what about Batman Returns? He's asked me as a Christmas movie. Yeah, that's a good. I did contemplate that. Sorry, I'm just turning the phone here for good measure. My tripod's doing funny things. Everyone's like, whoa. By the way, that is the maneuver that they should have pulled on one of those Star Destroyers with those horses on it, just tilted sideways, and everyone would have fallen off. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a simple guy. Trying to make my way in the universe. So here's the list of movies that I must watch in the holiday break. So the Star Wars original trilogy, because you can watch them sort of back to back over like 3 days or 3 nights, or even maybe you can pull like a Boxing Day marathon where you start early in the morning, and if Mum will let us, and we just watch them back to back. The second is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That is it's phenomenal. That's how you make a trilogy. By the way, JJ, everyone seems to have forgotten that it is still possible to make really good trilogies in the modern era, and Peter Jackson, good old Peter Jackson, one of my fellow Kiwis, proved that you can make a really good trilogy film. If you do it well, you take your time and you invest. In his case, it was over a decade in the actual making of the 3 films. And so they're always worth a watch. Jose said extended cuts or theatrical Lord of the Rings. Well, with the kids, often it's theatrical, but I try and watch the extended cuts. And I've also got 2 different versions. I got the Blu-ray, but I also got the old DVD set that came out. I got it for Christmas about, it must have been 8 or 9 years ago. And they've got those, so it's got both cuts. You just turn the disc over. Plus, it's also got, each movie has got like a 3-hour documentary with it. And it's like it's basically the uncut footage. Well, it's not uncut actually. They edited the footage, but there's no narration. It's not like a narrated documentary, but it's following the production of the film, each movie from woe to go. So there's like a 3-hour documentary with each film, or 2.5 hours or something. It's really fascinating to watch that. And the other 2 films on my holiday period Christmas must watch list are Shawshank Redemption. It's one of the best films ever made. You've got to watch The Shawshank Redemption when you get the chance. Such a beautiful film about hope. Frank Darabont, one of the best filmmakers for adapting Stephen King material. He did it with Shawshank Redemption. Obviously, he did it again with The Green Mile. He did it with The Mist. Plus, he added that end at The Mist, and he added that ending that Stephen King said, I wish I had thought of that ending that Frank Darabont wrote for the movie. So yeah, Frank Darabont and Stephen King, what a combination. And The Shawshank Redemption, man, amazing film about hope. Observer Dude says, I think Shawshank is a bit overrated. No, how could you say that? I'm cancelling you. It's funny. I think some people love it for sure. I'm one of those. I love it. I think possibly part of it is I was around when it got released, and I remember when it took off and became a big thing on home video. And I've loved it ever since. It was it's such a beautiful treatise on hope. That's why I think I love it so much. And then the last one that I've really in the last few years have taken to in a big way is True Grit, the remake of True Grit. Andrew Devereaux, welcome Andy. Andy says Princess Bride. Yeah, The Princess Bride is a very watchable film. My wife loves The Princess Bride. My girls now love The Princess Bride. And you can watch, it is such a great film. Anyone of any age can watch that film, well, just about any age, because there's a couple of scary bits for young kids, but just about anyone of any age can watch that film and get something out of it. And you can keep rewatching it. There are very few films like that. Usually films that have a sort of rewatch factor also have like a niche factor to it. It's like, you're a bit of a fan of a particular type of thing, and that's why you rewatch a certain film. Or it might be a film that only certain audiences can keep rewatching. Like it's a kids movie, or it's for older people, or for adults, or whatever. This is not like that. This is a film that just about anyone can watch and keep rewatching. So Princess Bride. But the remake, the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit, is phenomenal. Now, if you haven't read the novel, True Grit, it's not a big read. I've got it on my shelf. I got my girls actually earlier this year to read it. I gave them, Maddie Ross narrates the whole thing. It is such a good novel. Roald Dahl, who wrote things like the BFG, James and the Giant Peach, and all those other Twits, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, all of those other classics, those classic novels. My kids love Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl said that True Grit was one of the best novels ever. He loved it. One of his favourite novels. And so the novel is phenomenal. If you haven't read it. Read it. And the Coen brothers were very faithful to the novel. Very, very faithful. It's one of those adaptations. Almost, it's like The Road, a very faithful adaptation to the actual source material. And Jose said, for the longest time I called him Ronald Dahl. That's classic. I had a mate of mine when I was in primary school called Roald. It was the only other person I knew called Roald. He kept trying to tell me. I'm pretty sure he was telling lies. We were very young at the time, but he kept trying to convince me that he was related to Roald Dahl because his first name was also Roald. And I was like, even at a young age, I was like, I don't think that's how that works. Yeah, the novel True Grit and the Coen brothers adapted True Grit and that remake. It is phenomenal. I mean, I did a bit of a naughty thing and I played it to my kids and my girls loved it. I'd forgotten about one of the bits with the in the cabin with the knife. I'd forgotten about that bit because I wouldn't be I'm not in the habit of showing them violent films or anything. And other than that, they loved it. That's why they wanted to read the novel. And so for me, True Grit is a film I can just sit down and watch over and over. And again, Morden Gray says, we watched the entire and only season of Firefly and the movie Serenity. Yeah, Serenity's in my movie collection. I love that film. And that is a film, if it wasn't for the Reavers, I would be watching that with my kids now. They'd probably freak out about the Reavers bit. But that is such a well-made film, man. Stay shiny. Yeah. That's right, Carl. That was Joss Whedon's, I reckon, at his best. There was other stuff he did that I didn't rate as much, but I thought that was great. And I think some of the early Buffy the Vampire Slayer stuff as well. Let's see. Some people have given me their Christmas lists. Kyle says, Kyle Kilborn, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your first name right there, mate, says, I have yet to see Shawshank Redemption, but not a huge Stephen King fan. He's a bit too graphic and I can stomach a lot. Trust me, watch Shawshank Redemption. It is not a horror story. It's one of Stephen King's, like Stand By Me. It's a story that he wrote that is not a horror story. It's a phenomenal film. Very well made, still holds up, and it's about hope. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, you don't know the plot, I think you're in for a real treat. I think probably everyone would agree with that here, wouldn't they? Apart from those who maybe think it's overrated. Hamlet Tragedy 89 says to me, what are your feelings on Ray Harryhausen films? Well, tell me, Hamlet, tell me which ones in particular you think are worth watching. The Dollars trilogy. Yeah, that is it. That is, a lot of people said it to me last year too. Got to watch the Dollars trilogy, man. You can't beat. This is the time of year for good westerns. I love Gary Cooper's High Noon. Gary Cooper in High Noon. I watched that with my kids actually. A couple of things about that film. There's a really great opening shot where they put a steady cam on top of a horse and carriage that races through the town. That was so creative at the time. That was great. Secondly, it's not a long western, and the premise is pretty simple, and I think it's probably more relevant now than ever before with all of this kind of witch hunting that's going on, these mobs, witch hunt mobs, and it's a film that's clearly written about what was happening in Hollywood during the McCarthy era, and people calling out people and accusing them of things, and then going on big witch hunt mobs. And it's such a great film about courage, though, the virtue of courage, even when your closest friends are not willing to be courageous and stand in the face of evil. Great film. By the way, I finished watching the television series Castle Rock, season 2 now. I've finished both seasons. Man, that is some great television. Oh gosh, I've loved that both seasons, man. You know, you often have a first season of a TV series and then the second season starts to lag or fall off a bit. Not this one. Man, brilliant. Taking Stephen King characters and putting them into that context and rewriting a new story and just inserting all those Stephen King characters into it. And they've been faithful. They've captured the essence of sort of the Stephen King novels and stories have a certain ambiance to them, and like there's a tone. You read them, and I think if you're a Stephen King reader, you know what I mean. They feel. Daniel says to me, "What about 3:10 to Yuma? Do you mean the original or the remake?" I like both. I'm going to talk about 3:10 in just a second when I get to the vinyl. I've got a stack of vinyl here that I want to show you, my favourite vinyls. But I'll talk about 3:10 to Yuma and then remind me again. But I love both. And the remake was great, man. That was such a great one. But anyway, Castle Rock, and you take these Stephen King characters and they've captured the ambience of Stephen King. And it's just, they've done it so well. It's possible. So the Coen brothers with True Grit proved that you can still make good films and you can make good reboots in the modern era and remakes of things. Castle Rock proves it's still possible to write good television. And even if you are borrowing other source material, to do it in a new and creative way, and that's what they've done, man. There's a great scene in season 2, I won't spoil it, of Castle Rock, where Tim Robbins, who's one of the main characters in season 2 of Castle Rock, who obviously played the lead role of Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption. And Castle Rock is this town, the events unfold in that town, and it centers around the prison of Shawshank, which is in the town. It's like the hub of this town. And there's this great scene in season 2 where Tim Robbins gets out of his truck, and I'm pretty sure this is from memory. They've got a low camera angle. He gets out of his truck, and he's in front of the gate for Shawshank Prison, and it was just such a great piece of homage to Stephen King. 3:10 to Yuma is great. Lady and the Tramp, yeah, you can't beat some of those classics, eh? Secret Life of Pets 1, yeah, my kids love that Secret Life of Pets. Who was that? Someone asked, was that Blade Runner 2049? Someone said to me, I'm assuming that's what that someone said, absolutely, 2049 is one of the best movies in years. Sorry, I'm looking for who you're responding to there, Kyle. Is that Blade Runner you're talking? Yes, Blade Runner. Blade Runner 2049. It is just, I've got that on my iPad. I don't have a lot on my iPad. When I travel often, I might have moments of downtime. I do speaking engagements and things. You have to have downtime. And so Blade Runner 2049, or if I'm on a plane and I've got rubbish movies, I will flick that film on and I will just, it's such an immersive experience. Man, it's so good. Blade Runner 2049. I love that. Can't get enough of it. It's just so well made. Absolutely well made. And also, so Yuri says, Tron. I like Tron. The second one was weird. Other way around for me. I was there for the original Tron, but I love Tron Legacy. And I'm gutted that they're not making another one. There was plans to, and it's been shelved apparently. And my kids they absolutely love Tron Legacy. And by the way, on Disney, if you've got Disney Plus, they've got the Tron cartoon series that came out after Legacy. It's actually really good. It's a very, very good and enjoyable watch. I don't know what it is about Tron Legacy, but man, really good. Jose said the French film, The Untouchable. I think you mean Untouchables, Jose. The Untouchables, or is it The Untouchable? I can't. It's a really good film though. Highly recommend that film. They've made a recent remake, American remake with Bryan Cranston. Don't watch that. Watch the original French film. When it came out, it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, and then they took it off the list, which was so absurd. And it's based on a true story about a guy who he becomes is it paraplegic or tetraplegic? I can't remember which, but he's sort of wealthy white French guy who ends up with a French, is he Nigerian? A French Nigerian or French Algerian carer who's from a lower socioeconomic strata, but teaches him how to live life and how his life is worth living. He thinks of himself as being disabled and having no value anymore, and it's such a good film. Don't. Jose says watch the original, not the Kevin Hart remake. The original was so good, and I don't know why they took it off that list that year for the Academy Awards. It should have been. I think it should have won actually. Andy Devereaux says the TV series Bosch. I've never got into that, Andy. I don't know much about it. So Equilibrium. Oh, yeah. Equilibrium is a good film. Okay, so we'll come back to movies. Plenty of time to talk about movies in just a second. Merry Christmas for those who have just joined us. I'm now going to talk about, people have been asking, can you... Oh, here we go. Hamlet, I will answer your question, Hamlet. I hope I'm not too far off base here, but how do you feel about Clash of the Titans 1981? Why do you think these movies still have significance? I think Clash of the Titans 81 was better than the remake. Does anyone else think that? Like, I thought Clash of the Titans 1981 was actually... It was better than the remake. The remake was bizarre. The remake was in that... Remember that period of cash grabs? I mean, when have we not been in a cash grab period since consumerism took off? But... remember, there was that period of cash grabs movies that were made after the 300 was made. So Frank Miller does the 300, and two things happened after that film. All of a sudden, people started deifying and glorifying Sparta and completely misunderstanding Spartan history and thinking that Spartan was the first democracy. It was not. You wouldn't have wanted to have lived in Sparta. It was a brutal, horrible place. At times to live, and it was definitely not a democracy. So that was the first thing that happened. Lots of people misunderstood Sparta. Second thing that happened was a lot of people discovered Frank Miller's original graphic novel. Third thing that happened was that people, all of a sudden there was this cash grab of films that came out. People were like, ooh, they like the ancient Greek stuff. Let's release ancient Greek mythology films. And so there was a cash grab. Remember, there's a whole slew of films, and Clash of the Titans was one of those ones, and yeah, it was hopeless. Oh man, what were they thinking? The original was great. The remake felt like a video game. Remember that there was a whole slew of them though. I was somewhere recently and I saw one of those films and I was like, I didn't even realize that movie had been released. Like there was that many of these things saturating the market. Louis Rosario says, have you ever heard of Panzer Dragoon? I don't know. Have I heard of Panzer Dragoon? I'm trying to think. Louis, remind me. The name rings a bell, said Quasimodo. Hashtag dad jokes. Yeah, Jose says Prince of Persia. That was another one. Oh, I'm ashamed to admit, I actually owned that on DVD very briefly, and then I came to my senses. I was like, what am I doing with this in my collection? Oh, man, that was bizarre. That was Jake Gyllenhaal, wasn't it? Before he came to his senses. Immortals, Hercules, Wrath of the Titans. That was the one. Wrath of the Titans was the one that I was like, I didn't even realize they'd put this out. Sorry, excuse me. Let's look at these LPs. I'm going to go through these LPs. Gods of Egypt. That was another one. I was on a plane somewhere recently and I saw that. I didn't watch it. I was like, ugh. I'm going to review some movies I have watched in just a minute, but let me talk about. Yeah, Andy, you're right. The Prince of Persia is a great 90s PC game. In fact, it was before that. I had an Apple IIe. For those who remember the Apple IIes, I owned an Apple IIe with my green screen. In fact, I was pretty special. I had a color screen at one point, and Prince of Persia was on there. It was classic. It was always the game. You take that floppy disk to school with you in computer studies when you're supposed to be actually programming and learning stuff, and you'd quietly insert it when the teacher wasn't looking and start playing Prince of Persia. It wasn't like today, though. You couldn't hide your screen or anything. Man, how times have changed. You young kids, you've got it so easy. Back in my day, we walked to school uphill in the snow for 40 miles. And there were vampire bats that would attack you. And they had AIDS. And that's how you got the AIDS back in my day. You know, you today with your newfangled buses and your shoes on your feet. Anyway, we're not going to do that. Let me talk about some of the LPs in my my vinyl collection. Because several of you have asked me, can you talk about some of your favourite LPs? And then I'm going to talk about movies. I'm going to do some quick-fire movie reviews. So let me go through these, and I'll tell you why I love them. This one here is called Jazz Legends. I got given a special voucher for my birthday, which was a week and a half ago. And so my family got me a record store voucher, and I'm just slowly working my way through it. And I love finding bargains. And I got this one. This cost me $13 brand new. And this is such a great little album. Look at some of these hits that are on here. Nina Simone, My Baby Just Cares For Me. Great song. And the actual recording, the pressing of this is good. It's a good pressing, and the quality's good. Minnie the Moocher with Cab Calloway and his orchestra doing Minnie the Moocher. Ella Fitzgerald, who is phenomenal. If you haven't heard Ella Fitzgerald, you've got to listen to Ella. But she's doing Mac the Knife, her version of Mac the Knife. It's great. Take 5, the Dave Brubeck Quartet. Dinah Washington doing Mad About the Boy. Billie Holiday doing Strange Fruit. Personally, I think Nina Simone's version of Strange Fruit is better, but man, it's such a great song. Summertime by Lena Horne. There's a lot of good stuff on here, and that was a $13 album. I love finding a bargain, and that was a great find for like $13. A couple of musical albums in my collection. Les Mis, The Highlights. And my wife loves Les Mis as well. We've been to see it actually a couple of times live when local theatre companies or theatres have put it on. And so yeah, Les Mis, Highlights from Les Mis. That is a great LP. And I think I got this for like $2 or something, and it was in good nick. The Phantom of the Opera. You can't. I've been playing this to my girls, actually, my kids, actually, my boys into it as well. We worked through a side each night. So the 4 sides, 2 LPs, and yeah, Yuri, Strange Fruit is such a beautiful song. The Phantom of the Opera, and it's got the book in it and everything. So the kids love, like I did when I was a kid. I loved the book. My parents had this LP. They had the CD actually. The LP's better because the book's a bit bigger, and they follow along with it, and it's such a great LP. Getting into the classics now. Louis Armstrong, Hello Dolly. This album, I think I got this for like 50 cents. And it's in good nick. It's in really good nick. And it's got him, Satchmo, doing songs. There's some real classic on here. He's doing Moon River. Love Moon River. Blueberry Hill. You haven't lived until you've heard Satchmo singing Blueberry Hill. And this is one of my favorites, is Jeepers Creepers. And my wife, it cracks me up because years ago when we were first married, we watched that film. What was that film with... It had Jeepers Creepers as the theme song. It's the horror film. Was it called The Collective? What the heck was it? No, it was called Jeepers Creepers. It was Jeepers Creepers. Remember Jeepers Creepers? Does anyone remember that film? That horror film from about 10 years ago. No, maybe 11, 12 years ago. And Jeepers Creepers is the theme song at the very end. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but Louis Armstrong doing Jeepers Creepers, my wife always cracks up with that. This is another one of my favorites, Sinatra's Swinging Sessions. I got this one for 50 cents. It's an original pressing. It's got weight, Capitol Records. It's actually got weight to it, and the quality is phenomenal. And it's got him doing some real classics. I love Chairman of the Board, man, Frank Sinatra. But I love, where is it? It's Only a Paper Moon. Man, that's such a great... Blue Moon, this is such a good LP, and it's not your sort of what you might call typical Sinatra. I'm not an exclusivist or a hipster or anything. Oh, I don't do mainstream. No, mainstream's great, but what I love about this is it's got some stuff on there that doesn't often make it onto the Frank Sinatra best of albums and playlists and things like that, but are really, really good that people should listen to. Here's a bit of a classic one. If you were a child of the 80s, you will remember this. Okay? Do you remember this? Clannad, legend. Now, Clannad were great. You might also remember Clannad if you went to see the film Last of the Mohicans, which is Michael Mann's remake of the story, the retelling of that story. It's a great film. I loved still do. It's in my collection on Blu-ray, in fact, Last of the Mohicans. Such a good film. James Horner soundtrack is phenomenal. But Clannad did a song at the end of that. What's it called? Wherever You Go, I Will Follow You, I think it is, at the very end of that. But that's Clannad. Clannad did the soundtrack for the BBC Robin Hood TV series in the 80s, and man, we used to hang out every week to watch a new episode of this show. It was such a good TV series. A very young Ray Winstone was in this. I think he played Little John, didn't he, in this? And so, yeah, Clannad legend. Again, this was like $1, I think I got this album for. Kyle says, aren't turntables aren't they pricey? Well, no, not actually anymore. You can either buy second hand, or you can do what I did, which is buy a newer machine, which will allow you to play out to regular RCA audio outputs. If you buy an old one, phono only, you need a phono amplifier. It won't play on any other sort of system because of the impedance rating on the outputs. But there's newer versions, and I got myself a newer one. It's just a basic player, but it's also got a Bluetooth adapter on it, and I plugged that into to an amplifier, secondhand, but quality secondhand amplifier we bought when we were very first married. It's still going. 15 years later, it is still functioning. We bought it secondhand, and it is starting to, the volume knobs are falling off because of the kids, but so plugged it into that, and that makes all the difference in the world. Okay, here we go. Here's a couple of classics. If you're a child of the 80s, you can't go past the Pet Shop Boys. Sorry, are they showing? So Pet Shop Boys actually, which I loved It's a Sin when I was a kid, so that's on there. And Pet Shop Boys, Please. Yeah, I love the Pet Shop Boys, man. They're great, and so I added them to my collection. Here we go. Here's a bit of if anyone here is of a religious persuasion, of a Christian persuasion, or if not, you may have heard of this band Petra. Here's a piece of nostalgia for you. I picked this up recently. This is their Never Say Die album, and I think it was one of their best. Petra have been around for a long time. I think they're still going. I don't know. I don't listen to them anymore, but I'm pretty sure they're still going. And they're sort of cheesy, keyboardy, sort of that now. But they had a period where, man, they were, and this was, I reckon, their best album. This has a sound, and they changed vocalists. They changed their sound and their style over the years. This was their older vocalist. What was his name? Was it Greg Vox? I can't remember his name. Greg Schultz. Greg Voltz, sorry. And the guitar work on this is some of the best. And look, here's the thing. If you took this album and you changed the lyrics, because obviously they're Christian bands, so there's some Christian lyrics on here, but they're really good. It was good stuff. So there's a song here I really love called For Annie, and it's about a girl who committed suicide. And it's a beautiful piano ballad. There's a great song they wrote called Angel of Light, which is about temptation to vice. But it's got a great guitar riff. It's classic 70s. This could be Judas Priest meets the Eagles, the harmonies, the guitar work. This was such a great album. It actually, as I said, if you can listen to this album and get past the Christian lyrics, would not a bother for me, because I'm a Christian man. I'm a man of the resurrection, so I think it's fine by me. But if you can get past because they are a little bit cheesy, I'll be honest, in places they are a little bit cheesy. The musical work on this is, man, it is great. Yeah, anyway. Nigel Jones says, come on, Brendan, get Bondi Road out. Oh, wait, I'll go you one better. Dire Straits. This I got real cheap because it was actually damaged, but Brothers in Arms is such... I used to listen to this album when I was a kid. Our local library, you could actually rent LPs. Borrow LPs, and I would always borrow this, and I would play it over and over again. And this has got the original uncorrupted version of Money for Nothing, before those lyrics. You know what I'm talking about. Those lyrics were changed because they were too offensive. And I also recently added a couple of really good Dire Straits albums to my collection. They were $10 each, so I couldn't resist. Dire Straits, Love Over Gold. And why I love this album is it has got the full almost 15 minutes, 14 minutes and 20 seconds of Telegraph Road. If you haven't heard Telegraph Road, go and listen to Telegraph Road. Have I heard Alchemy by Dire Straits? Have I what? And the other one I bought for $10 was Making Movies. This is such a good album. Romeo and Juliet is on this album. What's the other one I love? Tunnel of Love on this one. Yeah, you just can't go past Dire Straits, man. Mark Knopfler. Speaking of The Princess Bride, Mark Knopfler wrote the soundtrack for that. He wrote the soundtrack for several movies, actually. Mark Knopfler is a phenomenal songwriter and guitarist and lyricist, and Dire Straits, just amazing. Now, this is a classic. I got this one. Again, it was a bit damaged, so I got it cheaper. It's really hard to find this album today in any format. Actually, I've been looking, certainly here in New Zealand, but Tour of Duty 2, the soundtrack from the TV show Tour of Duty. I loved the second one because it had that cover of Paint It Black. Now, everyone says, oh, it's not the original Rolling Stones Paint It Black. Of course it's not. It's by Chris Farlow. But here's the thing about this version of Paint It Black. I reckon it is the best cover of Paint It Black that has ever been released. And a lot of people don't realise that Mick Jagger himself produced this cover, this version of Paint It Black. Mick Jagger produced it. It is phenomenal. Chris Farlow was sort of known, I guess maybe he was the Beck of his time. He was the singer's singer, the musician's musician. He was that kind of guy. And so his version of Paint It Back is, I reckon it's just phenomenal. I love it. I actually just quietly, I mean, the original's the original, but I kind of quietly, just between me and you, and don't tell anybody else on YouTube, but I actually kind of like it, I think, more than the original. But this has got, listen to the tracks that are on this second Tour of Duty. I think the second one was better than the first, even though I miss White Rabbit. I wish White Rabbit was on here. But it's got Paint It Black. It's got Tin Soldier by Small Faces, Stone Free by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Sunshine of Your Love by Cream, Born to be Wild by Steppenwolf, Reach Out, I'll Be There by the Four Tops, People Get Ready by The Impressions, Jennifer Juniper by Donovan, Your Precious Love by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, Side 2, Groovin' by the Young Rascals, 8 Miles High by the Byrds, Cloud 9 by the Temptations, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Piece of My Heart by Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the Holding Company. That is, Janis Joplin, man. It Takes a Lot to Laugh. It takes a lot to laugh. It Takes a Train to Cry by Al Cooper and Stephen Stills. Ring of Fire by Eric Burdon and the Animals. Spinning Wheel by Blood, Sweat and Tears. My boy loves that song ever since he first heard it on this LP. Bridge Over Troubled Water by Aretha Franklin. That is a phenomenal album. Does anyone remember the TV series? Kerry Ford says I'm going to tell. Yeah, if you want your secrets kept, don't put them on YouTube. But does anyone remember Tour of Duty TV series? If you haven't, you should go and discover it, about the Vietnam War. Man, that was a great TV series. We're getting there. Just a couple more to go. If you haven't already, you should be listening to this guy here, Nat King Cole. I'll tell you why I love this one. First of all, I've got a couple of Nat King Coles. I love this one, a special sentimental value, because my father, who died last year, I inherited his LP collection. It wasn't big. I've added a lot to it. But this was one of the LPs, and I remember this. He loved Nat King Cole, my dad. And I reckon Nat King Cole died of cancer relatively young. He was young when he died. Nat King Cole, I think, was one of the greatest crooners with Frank Sinatra, one of the best. And even though he's not rated in the Rat Pack or anything like that, I think he was up there. I think I actually would put him above Frank Sinatra. But if you haven't heard Nat King Cole, you need to hear Nat King Cole. I've got a couple. The reason I've added, this is his 20 greatest hits, which is actually is missing. I added this one. I got this one cheap. It's got Route 66 on here, and it's also got him doing the Christmas song, which is but here's the thing about Nat King Cole. If you want to get introduced to Nat King Cole, listen to Nature Boy. Nature Boy is, you probably know the remake. If you've watched Moulin Rouge, you've heard the song Nature Boy. But Nat King Cole's phenomenal. Here's a bit of a classic. Thunderball, the soundtrack. This was another one I inherited from my father, and that just has nostalgic value. I remember, but yeah, Time in a Bottle is so good. I remember listening to this as a kid when Dad was out sneaking his records, and Thunderball was it's the original James Bond 007 soundtrack, and I just loved this, man. Part of it was I loved the images on the actual album cover, but Tom Jones, John Barry and his orchestra. That was classic, man. So that was that one. I put this on Twitter recently. Favorite Christmas songs. I've actually now got some Christmas albums I've added to the collection. So come Christmas time, we're going to have Christmas albums. This is one of them. This is phenomenal. I got this album. I think I paid 50 cents or $1 for this about 2-3 weeks ago. I couldn't believe it when I saw this in like the dollar bin. Let me tell you, this is Bing Crosby, Dean Martin, and the man himself, who we've just been talking about, Nat King Cole, singing Christmas songs. And it's called Favorite Christmas Time Songs. The album cover looks cheesy as all heck. And I think that's why it was in the dollar bin, because the album is not in bad condition. It's in good condition. And I think what happened was, because they had another bin up the front. It's quite a big record store in Wellington in New Zealand. And they had another bin up the front of Christmas albums, which were, shall we say, a little bit overpriced. And this wasn't in there. And I think someone missed it. I love finding a bargain like that. It's listen to this. You've got The Little Drummer Boy by Bing Crosby. I Saw Three Ships by Nat King Cole. Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas by Bing Crosby. White Christmas by Dean Martin. Away in a Manger, Nat King Cole. Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow by Bing Crosby. Joy to the World by Nat King Cole. Deck the Hall, Nat King Cole. Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and It Came Upon a Midnight Clear by Bing Crosby. The First Noel by Nat King Cole. Frosty the Snowman by Bing Crosby, Silent Night by Nat King Cole, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer by Dean Martin, and I Wish You a Merry Christmas by Bing Crosby. These songs are the songs that keep appearing in Christmas movies all the time, and you go, oh, I love that song. And I got that for $1, so I'm looking forward to getting that on tomorrow. It's going to be played in our house. 4 albums to go. How do I work through these? You've got to have this. If you've got a vinyl collection, this is a must-have. Jeff Wayne's musical version of War of the Worlds. Now, this didn't cost me $10. It cost me, I think, $5 in Australia when I was on a trip in Sydney earlier this year. I'd love to, if I get spare time on my speaking engagements, to go and actually check out record stores. And this one, it's got that secondhand record store smell. Oh, man. And this album, I remember this. I was introduced to this by one of my, when I was 10 or 11, my primary school teachers. He was a Kiwi, but he lived and worked in the UK. He'd been to see Queen live at Wembley Arena. You know, he's one of those kind of guys. And he introduced us to War of the Worlds. And we used to have this LP version sitting in our class. And if we'd been good in class, at the end of the week, we'd get to listen to it. This is such a good album. I love this. And my boy, who's called Nathaniel, loves that track about Parson Nathaniel. You know, no Nathaniel, oh no Nathaniel, no. He loves that. And so there's a joke in our house that when his wife is crying out, Nathaniel, that's mum, because he's like that. Nathaniel, get in here now. He's like, I'll be there in a minute. But War of the Worlds, this is such a classic. And what I love about this one is it's actually, I got this for $5, and it's got the original book inside it with all the illustrations in it, and my kids love this, like I did when I was a kid. You'd sit there and listen to this, and Gordon Lightfoot. Daniel says, anyone remember him? Right, here we are, working our way through them now. What order should I do these in? Okay, Pseudo Echo, the original Pseudo Echo album. If you like synthwave, new synthwave, and you haven't listened to Pseudo Echo, the 80s band, you know, you don't know what you're missing out on, but this is the album to get. So it doesn't have their remake of Funky Town, but I don't think that everyone knew them for their remake of Funky Town, but Funky Town wasn't their best song. Things like Listening, A Beat for You, but there's other stuff on here. Walk Away, Fast Car, Destination Unknown. There's a lot of really good songs on this. I got this cheaply too. 3 to go. This is one of my favourite albums that I could just listen to, and I do over and over again. Icehouse, Man of Colours, and this, I couldn't believe it. I was in a record store recently, and they had various versions of this. They're like $30 to buy second hand. I got this one for $20, and it's the same album in black. But Icehouse, Man of Colours is a great album. If you know Electric Blue, you might know Electric Blue. Even in the States, I think that song did some good business. But this is an album where every song is excellent. And Ivor Davies, man, what a voice. Last 2 albums now, just to wrap up with. And these 2 have real special sentimental value for me because of they were in my father's collection. He loved both of these singers and these albums, and they still play today. Years and years, decades later, and I still play them to my kids today. The first is Frankie Lane, Hellbent for Leather. And this album is like, if you love westerns, man. So Frankie Lane, this has got things like Rawhide. If you watch the Blues Brothers where they do Rawhide, yeah, you haven't heard Rawhide till you've heard Frankie Lane doing Rawhide. High Noon, Wanted Man, Cool Water, you probably know if you've seen Rango, the movie Rango, you will have heard Cool Water. A version of Cool Water was in that movie. Bowie Knife, Gunfight at the OK Corral from, Wyatt Earp. The 310 to Yuma. That's why I talked about this before, that he did his 310 to Yuma. It's just great. These are great ballads. And last but not least is Marty Robbins, Gunfighter Ballads. This is a great album. And I love this album. This has got real sentimental value. There's lots of these are songs that tell stories like good westerns do, and these are good western songs that actually tell stories, and they're really good. You will probably know El Paso. If you know, what's the other one that you probably know? You will probably know. They're Hanging Me Tonight. No, El Paso. I'm trying to think. Actually, there was one of these songs was used in that final episode of Breaking Bad, which had a really clever use of music. And in Breaking Bad, they used the Marty Robbins classic, and I can't remember which one it is, about Rose's Cantina. Is it where is it? Anyway, so but basically you've got this cowboy who goes into a cantina in Mexico, and he becomes obsessed with this woman, Rose, Felina in Rose's cantina, and he's an idiot. He gets into a fight over her. He just loses his mind with his infatuation, and then but he can't leave her. He has to go back into the town because he's a nut job. He's obsessed with her now, and he goes back, and what happens? He gets killed. And that's exactly what happened in Breaking Bad, which was why when Walter White gets into that car that he steals at the beginning of the final episode, and he hotwires the car, and there's a tape in the tape player, and it's playing Marty Robbins, that song, because it's foreshadowing what's going to happen in that episode. But the reason I really love this album is my dad loved this album, and there's a song on here called The Master's Call, and it's a story about a cowboy who's lives a bit of a rugged, crooked life and a bit of a life of vice. But then one night a herd stampedes on him. It gets out of control, and the herd is about to run him down. And then at the last minute, a bolt of lightning hits a tree, forms the shape of a cross, and he hears God's voice. And the herd divert around because of the lightning bolt. They divert around him, and his life is saved. And it's this cowboy talking about how he changed his ways and converted his life. And my dad used to say to me, "Son, that song's about my life." My dad had grown up on a farm. His parents and grandparents had owned farms. He'd lived on a farm all his life. He'd worked farms, and then he went and worked in the forestry for a while, forestry service. And there's a lot of stories he didn't tell us about his life before he met my mum. And he really transformed his life, my dad. But like there's one, I remember when he was a bit older, he was telling me about this incident. There was a guy who was in the forestry service with, and you're working deep in the forest, logging and things like that. And you're away from civilization, and often it attracts some pretty rough characters. And there was a guy there who was a bully, who was threatening people. And my father hated bullying, and he stood up to him. My father refused to, he stood up to him. He always used to say to us, you never ever back down from a bully. They're always cowards. You don't. If they're bullying someone vulnerable and smaller, you always step in and help. And yeah, Pink Floyd is great. I'm actually going to add some Pink Floyd to my collection, by the way. And so he stood up to this guy, and then this guy turned up with a few of his mates and was threatening him, and it was pretty serious. And my dad told me he was barricaded in his forestry cabin where he stayed. And he's sitting there this overnight, basically sat there, kept watch the whole night with a shotgun at the front door, sitting in a chair. And this guy was outside threatening to come in and kill him. And he said, look, well, come on in then, mate. That was my dad. And so he loved this album and that song, The Master's Call. He's like, son, I lived a pretty rugged and bad life before I met your mum and turned things around. And so that has special sentimental value. So there you go. There are some of my favourite vinyl. Let's move on now to movies I have watched on planes, and we'll do some quick fire movie reviews. Let me go through them. Shaft. I didn't know that they'd remade this. They'd made another Shaft thing, and here it is: Samuel L. Jackson, Shaft. I lasted 15 minutes, and I couldn't. I'm on a plane, and I'm thinking, I am not going. Oh, Cisco. Cisco says all my vinyl records got stolen, mate. I'm sorry to hear that. That is awful. I watched Shaft. I lasted 15 minutes of this film, and I was like, I can't do this. This is just, what is this movie? This is awful. And I just quit. I quit out of it. Alt Control Delete. Get me out of this thing. Yeah, it was a mess. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it got really good and became one of the masterpieces. One of the greatest pieces of cinema that was ever been released. But Shaft, no, thank you. Ready or Not. Ready or Not is that horror film about I guess it's supposed to be a black comedy. I watched the whole thing, and I thought it was completely overrated. The reason I watched it was because on the plane I was on, they had Wi-Fi, so I got onto Rotten Tomatoes before I because I hadn't heard about it before, and I got on Rotten Tomatoes, and it said, "Oh, ready or not, it's a new twist on the horror genre. It's lots of fun and black comedy and rah rah rah. It's one of the best things I've seen in years." These are from the critics. And Daniel says, "Mike and the Mechanics." Yes, Mike and the Mechanics, great band. Can't beat early Genesis, mate. Gave us a lot of good stuff, including other bands. Anyway, so I watched Ready or Not, and man, don't waste your time. It was just a generic, bland. I was like, I've seen this before. It's just so basically the premise is you've got this woman who marries this guy. He's like, my family's really quirky and weird, and you're like, oh, they do seem quirky and weird, and then you discover on the wedding night they have a family tradition where they play a game. And it's got a supernatural element to it, and this card gets drawn, and you have to play a game. And one of the games is hide and seek, but you have to murder the person if you find them. And so the person who marries into the family, if they draw the hide and seek card, have to play hide and seek, and they try and hunt you down with weapons and murder you. And it was honestly, it was like this film. I can't believe this film. I think it had like 75% or something. I was like, from the critics, I was like, what are they talking about? The film itself was not that memorable, and the message in the film I thought was just utter garbage. It was this weird sort of anti-marriage, anti-family, weird kind of isolated, lonely feminist empowerment message. I don't need no patriarchal family, and that was the subtle and not so subtle, perhaps, undertone in the film. And you get to the end and you're like, well, great. Live and die your hedonistic lifestyle, and then when you're old and alone and you realize I've got no kids, I've got no family, I've got no meaning, what have I done with my life? I think you'll look back with huge regret on this period of your life. But yeah, this movie was just so did not like it at all. The Kitchen. This is the one with Melissa McCarthy. I think she's in the lead role, isn't she? Yeah, I think she is. Melissa McCarthy, The Kitchen. It's a film that looks pretty, has got a great look to it, and a great sort of, we're really channeling some Scorsese here type vibes. But as far as the story goes and the concept, nah. And it just wasn't, these group of women who take over the crime business when their husbands get sent to jail. And of course, it's a film where effectively every man except for one really is bad, horrible, and evil and nasty. It was just politically. But even if you take out the politics, it was a film that I just found told a very unsatisfying story. Even if it might be possible for some people to look past the politics. They might really love the politics in it, but even then, I thought it was a very satisfying story. Observer Dude has asked me, what would you rate Rise of Skywalker from 1 to 10? Hold that question. We're going to talk about Rise of Skywalker soon. Captain Marvel. Finally watched it. With my daughter, actually. We were away on a trip, and we were able to get Captain Marvel where we were staying. And so she really wanted to watch it. She's 12. And so I was like, okay, well, let's watch it. And I watched it, and it was like, yep, I totally understand the criticism. Yeah, Captain Mediocre. That is the best description of it. The best thing about Captain Marvel was the cat. It really was. It's kind of like a lowbrow kids movie. It was a big mistake on the part of Marvel, really, when you think about it now, and when you think about their trajectory and where they were heading. And I think they probably thought it was going to be this amazing addition to Marvel. They were going to make this film. It was going to be phenomenal. Just on the riding the wave, the whole end game wave. They're going to, this is going to be great. Introduce this character. And I definitely think they probably had plans for her, bigger plans for her to be used in Endgame. But yeah, they changed. I'm pretty sure they changed and tweaked that after the film came out. Just like Brie Larson, I don't know why she was put in this role. It's just, and it's so noticeable. I thought people were. Andy says to me, did I do a review of The Irishman? Yeah, I did talk about The Irishman in a live stream about 2 weeks ago, Andy. I thought it was okay, but it's not Scorsese's best. And there were a couple of things. You can go and watch the live stream if you want, but I thought the whole de-aging was a bit overrated because the technology, well, it was great, but there was some uncanny valley moments, that's for sure. And also, De Niro still talks and sounds and walks like an older gentleman. So it was like, yeah, why not just use younger actors? Okay, so anyway, Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, it's just her acting style is so... It is wood, and I thought it was overhyped, but man, you just look at it going, was that the best line delivery they could get out of her? And it's like, where's the oomph, the emotion? Like, this character should be really quirky, not dry and there should be, this is where you need a Paul Rudd type actress. You need a female actress who's going to give you that Paul Rudd type oomph and really bring the character to life and the role to life. And that was lacking. The cat was the best thing in that film. Hobbs and Shaw. I watched Hobbs and Shaw on a plane. I had a flight from Perth. It's about seven and a bit hours to get to Perth from New Zealand, 5-hour time difference. And I go to Perth, Australia, and I watch Hobbs and Shaw. And a lot of people are like, oh, this movie's terrible. But it was a bit of fun. Hobbs and Shaw's, and Kevin Hart, the airplane marshal who thinks he's up there with Hobbs and Shaw. That was classic. It was a nice little cameo. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit of fun. And if you go into that movie, I actually thought it was better than some of the recent Fast and the Furious movies because it actually didn't take itself too seriously. It was just two guys who were like, this is a big dumb action movie, and it's just two dummies basically trying to out macho each other. I'm stronger and better and more manly than you are. It really is what's going on in the film, and it was great. It was just a lot of fun. It was a really enjoyable, fun film. Alita Battle Angel. I finally got to watch Alita, and I get what the hype was about. I understand why people liked Alita Battle Angel. I thought it was pretty good. My brother-in-law is over at the moment. My brother-in-law is a PhD in robotics. He works and lives in Japan, works for a big firm over there, and he's married to a Japanese girl. They've got a couple of young children, and they've just come over for Christmas in the last few days. And I was talking to him. He came around the other day, and I was talking to him about it. And I said, have you seen Alita? Because he's a bit of a fan of Japanese anime, and they watch the original Japanese stuff. And he said to me, yeah, it's okay. The original's much better. So like he was, so if you're a purist, you might not like it if you know the original story. I don't. But I loved it. I loved this film. I thought it was great. One thing that disappointed me about this movie, I would love to show this film to my kids. I really would. But there's a couple of things that they introduced, just a couple of adult moments into this movie that I felt was just a shame. Because tonally, it's not really like that. It's not a film that's an adult film at all. It feels more like you might call it young adult, aimed at sort of a young adult type audience. But then all of a sudden, there's these two moments in the story, including an F-bomb. And it was like, this just got adult all of a sudden. And so for my kids, I mean, I love my kids, and I'm not the world's greatest dad, but I try and be a good dad. And one of the things I try and do is actually ensure that I'm careful about what content they're getting exposed to. So when they're a bit older, they can watch it. But it was a shame because it's a film that I probably would have liked to have shared with them now. But it's just those couple of moments for me. But yeah, overall, I totally get why people loved Alita and why they were raving about it. And it's Rodriguez too, sort of out of nowhere. There's this film. I think that it's a great example. You can actually make and tell a good story tool. Cisco says this. Alita was formulative. That's true. They're definitely true. I think a lot of that is, though, isn't it? Anime's quite like that often, but had clever visuals and interesting conflicts. Yeah, I agree. There were probably things that were a little bit underdeveloped, probably a little bit rushed. That they're clearly trying to fit a lot into a shorter time frame. And it was one of those films where you sort of get to the end and you're like, oh, is that a false ending? They're still going. And I sort of thought it possibly could have ended a little bit earlier, but it's well told and it wraps up well. But that ending, the ending where they're climbing the tower thing and you see Edward Norton, wasn't it, playing the villain? We only see him very briefly in the film. That was interesting, but it did sort of feel like a little bit of a coming next week on Alita. Just sort of tacked on a little bit. But I don't know what else they could have done. It wasn't awful, terrible, but just that sort of stuck out to me. And then the two more. And this is really Captain Redneck says Alita was formulaic, but the formula works. Yeah, you're right, and you're absolutely right. It is. There are storytelling formulas that work. Here they are. Tell a good story, a compelling story with interesting characters who experience drama, and tell a story that is about the human experience, not about politics. It will date your movie very quickly, and it will not actually go deeper. There's no deeper mythology in that. Two other movies that yeah, you're right. Someone says that it's a great example of a well-written female character, and that's true. It's proof that you don't have to have a Mary Sue. It shows you, like, she's a character, interestingly enough, who's got aspects that would have been really good if they'd integrated them into the character of Rey Palpatine. If they'd integrated them into the character of Rey, you know, she's learning, she's naive, she makes mistakes. So yeah, well-written character. Two final films, quickfire movie reviews that I've seen on planes recently. Ad Astra. Ad Astra, man, I love that film. Ad Astra is my kind of science fiction. Ad Astra means to the stars. And it's Brad Pitt. The first time I watched it, I'm on a plane. I watched it twice on a plane. One flight, and a couple of weeks later it was on the plane, so I watched it again. The first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, this is not bad. I see why some people didn't get into it, though. I went back and watched it a second time, and I just really fell in love with the film. And what I really love about Ad Astra is it's about fatherhood. It's one of the big themes, about a son and a father, and the whole question of legacy and fatherly relationship as your dad gets older. And yeah, there's some real profound truths in there. That's one of the themes in it. I fell in love with that film. It's great. Last... The last, yeah, and that's the thing. So someone says to me, Ad Astra moved so fast. They're going on a mission. They're on the moon, and then next thing they are there. That's right. But that's the thing about Ad Astra. And after watching it the first time, I realised that and went back a second time, and I just sort of allowed myself to soak into what the movie actually was. And because the first time I thought it was going to be a big sci-fi, I don't know, save the world type MacGuffin type. It's not really. The MacGuffin save the world stuff is in there, but it's secondary. It's what it should be, really. The focus is actually on the relationship between him and his father, and that's why that secondary stuff happens. It seems so quickly, and it just sort of rushes. It feels like maybe it's rushing. It's not really, but it feels like, oh, we're there, and then we're there, and then we're there. It's actually about, the whole thing is, those things are just they are just sets. They are just plot points to unpack more of the unfolding nature of the relationship, of his relationship with his dad, and also who his father is as a character, and who he, Brad Pitt, as a character, and also his character arc, which unfolds so well from beginning to end. He discovers what it is to be authentically human, and what it really takes, which is, it's not selfishness, it's self-giving that really is the transformative thing. And I really loved it. I fell in love with it. I said, it's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to like it. I get that. If you're looking for more of a big spectacle type sci-fi, you're probably going to go, oh, yeah, it's not for me. That's cool. Not every movie is for every person. But man, I loved Ad Astra. Someone says for sci-fi, my best experience clearly was The Expanse. And I've seen the first couple of seasons, and I think The Expanse is great. For my money, The Expanse is probably the best television sci-fi since Battlestar Galactica. And funny enough, it's got a similar vibe going on too, actually. They're creating language, they're creating worlds, the world building's good. I agree with that. John said, I thought Ad Astra was Nolan light. Yeah, possibly. But I don't think it's a bad thing. What it means is people are actually looking at Nolan and they're going, this guy knows how to make films. There's something about Nolan films. He's got his own style. There's not many directors around today. There's some of the old era guys like Scorsese. You know a Scorsese movie, right? It's got a particular style, ambiance, tone, look, everything else. And you're like, yeah, that's a Scorsese film. There's very few new directors who have got that. That are what you call auteurs. And Nolan is an auteur. There's very few of them around. Most directors now are caught in a big studio system, or they're producing really consumable product, and they will flick around from thing to thing to thing. 1 minute when you think you've figured out what their style and tone is, next minute they're making a Marvel movie, which is completely different. It's just a sort of consumable product. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, the Marvel movie, but you know what I mean? Like it's, whereas Nolan has his own tone. And by the way, that's how you save Star Wars right now. You ask Christopher Nolan and his brother to write and produce for you, to actually write and direct a trilogy for you. That's what you do. If you're listening, Star Wars, Disney, Lucasfilm, that's what you do. If you want to save this baby, that's how you're going to save it. But hey, I'm a simple guy just trying to make my way in the universe. The last film, and you absolutely have to watch this film, is Danger Close, The Battle of Long Tan. I've been waiting for this film for so long, and I'd missed it in the theatres, because funnily enough, I was travelling for work, the speaking engagements at the time, and so I missed it in the theatres. I got to watch it on a flight recently. Man, it is good. Tells the true story of the Battle of Long Tan during the Vietnam War, and you had Australians who were over there, and Australian soldiers, and there were Kiwi soldiers who had volunteered to go as well. We weren't conscripted in New Zealand. And I have an uncle, a couple of uncles actually, who fought in Vietnam, and as volunteers they went over. And it tells the true story about a group of Australian soldiers who, because of some bad intel, it's basically like We Were Soldiers, similar concept, the Battle of the Ndrang Valley, where they bad intelligence and they're totally surrounded by the enemy, and they don't, they're totally outnumbered. And so the Battle of Long Tan takes place. These soldiers are pinned down and outnumbered. And what really saves their bacon, the reason it's called Danger Close, is because the Kiwis who ran the artillery, so the New Zealanders from my country ran the artillery, and they just kept that artillery coming. And they ran out of ammunition on the ground at one point, and they were walking in the artillery fire closer and closer to themselves, and they did it to keep themselves safe. There's some real heroes in that incident. The helicopter pilot who refused to obey orders and was told not to go in and take ammunition to them when they needed it, and he chooses to go in and under fire. I won't spoil it. But I was expecting this from a New Zealand and Australian perspective to be a movie where you think, okay, this is going to be this will be a film which will have special resonance because Australia and New Zealand were involved, and it's an Anzac thing. What I wasn't expecting was that this is actually right up there with some of the best war movies that have been made in the last 20 years. It's right up there with things like Black Hawk Down, Lone Survivor, We Were Soldiers, based on the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young, about Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore and the Battle in the Ndrang Valley. It's right up there. This is a film that actually is one of, on an international stage, matches it with any of those international war movies that you'll see. It's really, really good. If you haven't seen it, you should watch Danger Close, The Battle of Long Tan. Very, very good film. So yeah, here we go. So that's Danger Close. Now, a couple of things to talk about before we open up the floor. Christmas time, mistletoe and wine. The Mandalorian episode 7. Oh, someone said to me Ford versus Ferrari was great. I haven't seen it yet, and I still haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm going to rent Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on iTunes in the next couple of days over Christmas break and watch it. The Mandalorian episode 7. I don't know about how you guys felt, but for me, I now feel the series is starting to go around in circles a little bit. I thought, for me, it's not my favourite episode. I know some people are raving about it. I still think episode 6 was my favourite thus far in the season because it actually had an interesting sort of woe-to-go plot. It didn't really muck around too much. It felt there was a bit of freshness there, and there were some new interesting characters that he was interacting with. But episode 7... I thought the premise was weak from the very beginning. Why would he go back to Navarro? He's not an idiot. He's not an idiot. He knows that this is a trap. He would know. Like, even I knew. Everyone, my kids knew. I'm watching with my kids and they're like, that's a trap. Don't go back. That's the first thing they said. And my blooming 7-year-old boy is like, it's a trap. Don't go back. Like, it's like, why would he go back? Why? What does he really have to gain out of this? He doesn't really have a lot to gain, even though they try and set up this idea that, they'll let him go free. He would know this was a trap, so why would he go back? And they didn't really give him a strong enough motivation to go back. I think they could have made that motivation for him to actually end up back there a little bit stronger, so it would have made a little bit more sense. And the other thing that I found frustrating about this episode was like, why didn't they put the team together as they went? Think about, we were talking before about Firefly. Think about Firefly. There's a similar concept there where you bring this band of heroes together from very disparate and different backgrounds, and you bring them together and you make a team, a band of heroes. Why didn't they do that as each episode progressed? So, you know, you add a character to the team. You don't all of a sudden go back in episode 7 and then he goes and picks up each one of those characters one at a time and then adds them to a team. Why not give them a reason when they were introduced? Why not when you have, I don't know, you've got someone like Cara Dune who's introduced, why not give her a compelling reason to actually go and join him at that point and stay with him on the ship? And so as you know, the Ugnaught, why not have him join the crew right from that episode where we first met him? And then slowly you're building this team. I found that for some reason it really stuck out to me as frustrating that he decided to go back and put the team together for this one. And to me it didn't quite make sense. Thanks, Andy. Good to see you, brother. It didn't really make sense. Why would you go back and get that team just for that one mission? But if they'd all been together and then he got called back to Navarro, that'd be like, oh yeah, of course, this makes sense. They're all together and they've all got to go together, and so they've all got to help him out. I just found that frustrating. I think the immature Force-using Yoda is an interesting idea. And that is an interesting idea. A Force-capable being who has developed these, or has these powers, but they haven't developed the maturity to actually understand them properly. And so when he choked Cara Dune, just because, like, he didn't realize what he's doing, he's just choking her because he thinks he's helping the Mandalorian. That was that's an interesting concept. I thought that was interesting. Could be a bit more developed, but it is an interesting idea. What if you put a really powerful tool in the hand of a child, basically a very immature child? The healing powers. Come on, does anyone not naive enough? Well, surely we all realise that the reason that those healing powers from Baby Yoda are in there is because there's a tie-in with the Rise of Skywalker. They're trying to give an explanation, possibly, or they're trying to give justification, possibly, to Rey and her abilities in the Rise of Skywalker, because quite frankly, to me, it just didn't fit. It's kind of odd otherwise. Sorry, my printer's doing funny things underneath the bench there. Why would Grief Karga double-cross his own men like that? That was bizarre. Like, he got force healed, but Grief Karga is a real superficial, vacuous villain. He's in it for himself. If a guy like that got healed, he'd be like, great, I'm about to make even more money and I didn't die. He wouldn't be like, oh, I must change my ways and now I must become the Mandalorian's friend. And by the way, when he turned around and shot the 2 henchmen that he had with him, that was one of the dumbest scenes in the world. You want to talk about dumb action set pieces, that was it. So for those who haven't seen it, or those who might need a memory refresher, remember, you've got Cara Dune and the Mandalorian standing here. Behind them, you have the 2 bounty hunters ready to kill them, shoot them in the back. And then in front of them, completing the triangle, in front of Cara Dune and the Mandalorian, you have Grief Karga. And he's standing there and he turns around, swings around, faces the Mandalorian and Cara Dune and pulls out both his pistols and points them in their direction. But really he's pointing to the 2 goons behind them, and he shoots and kills those 2 henchmen. And I'm like, no. What would have actually happened here? As soon as he pulled those guns and started to turn, Cara Dune and the Mandalorian would have killed him where he stood. They would have shot him down. They would have just killed him in his tracks, because they would have thought, he's about to shoot us. That's exactly what that looked like. It's like, this doesn't make sense. What's going on here? But basically, for my money, we're at episode 7. We've only got one more episode to go now, episode 8, and it's all over, which happens in a couple of days' time. For my money, the series, The Mandalorian, has been a bit of a disappointment. I think it lacks heart. It lacks substantial heart. It has moments of what you would call goodness and moments of excellence, and then it just drops off the boil. and it's just lacking heart. I think it really needs to prove itself. It still hasn't proved itself to me at all. This feels like season 1 feels like an appetizer. It's like, here's some ideas. It's almost like a highlights reel that you try and sell to a studio to say, you should invest in our project. Here's what we can do. And they've sort of put some stuff together to show you what it could be. Yeah, and I get it. Someone's just said to me, Mandalorian, Man of Sand says, Mandalorian is like a Sergio Leone spaghetti western set in the Star Wars universe, and I agree. If it was done well, that's what it really would be. But it's got elements of that, but then other stuff where it goes off the boil, and still they've got that premise happening, and that's definitely working in its favour. But then the storytelling around it is dysfunctional. And so it still needs to prove itself. I think it's an appetizer that hasn't actually filled the void. And what's missing is a substantial heart. It just, yeah, and it also, by the way, I think, I said episode 6 is still my favourite overall. I think it needs to stay in its lane. It needs to decide what it is. Because as I said, I think I said this on Twitter the other day, I started watching the other night with my kids, Star Wars Rebels, and they haven't seen it before. And so I started watching it, and that Star Wars Rebels has more heart and more engagement, and it's a kid's cartoon. It knows what it was, and it stayed in its lane. The Mandalorian keeps shifting, and by the way, the story's a little bit light. The story in the Mandalorian is still very light. When you think about where we're at now, we're starting to repeat already motifs, storytelling motifs, and it's like this thing should have moved on more. We should have met this new character who we met in episode 7. I think we should have met him probably in episode 4. And so we can start building on this, but it's just, there's a slow burn and then there's too slow. And I think this is too slow. And by the way, just because something is better than The Last Jedi or it's better than what's we've had recently, it doesn't mean that that's good in and of itself. That's the mistake some people are making with The Rise of Skywalker. They're saying, well, it's better than The Last Jedi. Yeah, but I mean, so is the smack in the head with a wet fish. But I don't want one of those every day. So yeah, that's not really a justification for anything. That's my thoughts on Mandalorian episode 7. We're probably next time we talk, it will be the episode. The whole season will have wrapped up, and we can probably talk about it a bit more. But I'd love to hear what other people think. I'm finding it a bit underwhelming now. And Baby Yoda, I mean, it is a great bit of fun, and the kids love it. Baby Yoda, though, is really the reason I think a lot of people are now watching that show. Now, that's great from a marketing ploy perspective. People keep tuning in each week and they talk about your show. But from a storytelling perspective, it's not, because Baby Yoda is not the central character of the show and isn't doing anything of any meaning. You're literally just coming to see what cute little trick it's going to play this week. So it's very, very superficial. Is it going to be drinking soup or eating toast in an inappropriate situation? I can't wait to find out. It's very, very superficial. And it's not. I'm not saying that it's not fun. It's a bit of fun. It's a moment of fun and levity. But yeah, they're going to sell a lot of Baby Yodas. I don't know. Man of Sand says, will Baby Yoda be on the store shelves this Christmas? I don't know. But man, they're going to sell a lot of them when they finally arrive. Man, my kids are obsessed with it. They're drawing Baby Yodas everywhere. Kerry Ford says, I like Baby Yoda. And I don't nothing wrong with Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda is a lot of fun. But to be honest with you, I think most of us are tuning into that show to see the Baby Yoda, not the Mandalorian. And it's supposed to be the Mandalorian show. That's really what the problem is. Okay, where are we? The Watchmen. Let's talk about The Watchmen. Then we're going to talk about Rise of Skywalker. Just briefly, I'm not going to go, because I've already shared my thoughts and people are watching my review that I put up about Rise of Skywalker. I want to add 2 quick little things to that. Then we're going to open the floor and you can say whatever you want to. And then I'm going to have to wrap up. I've got to head out today and go and swim my 70 laps that I swim once a week. Christmas Eve, still going to swim them. And then I've got to go and mow the lawns, put up the gazebo, and do all the other things around the house that have got to be done because we're hosting Christmas tomorrow. So I've got a lot of man work. My wife has got a big list of things that I've got to do. So I must obey. Happy wife, happy life. Remember that, folks. Okay. No, more importantly though, I love my wife and I do things for her because I love her. Okay. If you're watching, dear, that's why I do them. Okay, so the Watchmen TV series, Jose says, unwatchable men. Here's what I think about the Watchmen TV series. This was self-important window dressing that was lacking in substance. It has things that make you think you are getting a substance or substantial television series that's well written. I mean, it's got slow burn elements to it. It has got some character development in there and some interesting things. But all together as a whole, taken as a whole, a classic example of this was that absurd blue sex toy that was introduced. It was in episode 3 or something, and you see that thing. And I read an article about that, why they chose to write that into. It was a female writer, by the way, in the writing room who came up with that idea. And reading about, they're so obsessed with how they think that writing this into the series, it's only a brief thing, it's not a major plot point. This writing a blue sex toy into a series is really clever, they think. I read this article, I think not in the New Yorker or something like that, and Damien Lindelof's talking about it, and it's like he spends a paragraph or two talking about how they wrote this moment, and one of their female writers came up with the idea, and they were like, should we do this? Oh, it's so edgy, it's so clever. And I'm like, no, it is not. This feels like a frat house, like a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, writing and thinking they're being really clever. And it was like the way they're talking about it, it's like these people don't know what they're doing. And they're obsessed, like this was a really great moment in television, and it was so, and it's like, no, it's not. It just wasn't. And it lacked substance. It did. The big thing that's a big problem for this series is the plot device of racism does not make sense as a substitute for nuclear war. The original one is about nuclear war. And some things are very time specific and time period specific. And the nuclear war thing was, and it has its own thing, the threat of global nuclear war. I remember as a kid being freaked out about it. I thought we were going to die in a global nuclear war at one point. Most kids did if you grew up in the 80s. I remember sneaking off to the school library at lunchtimes and reading books about nuclear war, like actual non-fiction books, and they would tell you all the missiles that were around and what their yield capabilities were and how many people would die in the blast radius and how many would get poisoned by the fallout, and they'd have all these various scenarios of what could happen. And I remember just freaking out. I read Neville Shute on the Beach, which is a great novel, by the way. If you haven't, I read it when I was in I just started, or before I started high school. I love that novel, but about a southern hemisphere, so Australia and New Zealand. There's been a global nuclear war. They're the last to die because we didn't get bombed. We had no bases, military bases, so we didn't get missile strikes. But there's this massive radioactive cloud that's working its way down and around the globe to the southern hemisphere, and we're all going to die from that. And it's this unfolding of these characters. There's an American submarine crew and a captain who was away from America. He was in an Australian port at the time, and so he's one of the characters in this. He's in Australia with the submarine crew, and they take a trip back to America at one point. Fascinating characters and stuff. But it was like, oh man, this could happen. We really thought it was real. The day after, when that came out, it was a big TV event here. There's going to be a nuclear war. We're all going to die. So it's a very period specific thing. And the original Watchmen captures that, and it gets the whole nuclear thing, and it really captures what that was, and it works as a plot device. To take Watchmen, to get rid of the nuclear threat and make it racism as the threat, it doesn't work. Racism is too localized. It's like nuclear war was a global threat, and racism is just too localized. Unless you're someone who's really obsessed with woke culture and you are apocalyptic and you're thinking and you catastrophize everything and you think that the whole world is falling down a big racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, phobic, hateful, big apocalypse, then this is not a global threat. And so it doesn't work. It doesn't translate. It's just like this doesn't work as your sort of driving, motivating factor here that's keeping everything, holding this whole story up. And so it didn't, and it was so weird. They start with this racist thing and then they sort of move away from it. By the end of it, it's not really about the racism anyway. It was bizarre. To me, it didn't, racism was not a good substitute for nuclear war. Episode 8 had plot holes, and I posted that on Twitter with a picture of Mr. Blue Man, Dr. Manhattan, and that awful version of Dr. Manhattan where you just got a guy in blue makeup doing blueface. And I posted that, and I had a little quirky dad joke that I attempted on Twitter, knock, knock, who's there, plot holes. And people thought I was saying that the blue makeup was the problem. That's not the problem. It wasn't. I'm not that simplistic that I can't look past someone's. I think it's a pretty poor attempt at Dr. Manhattan, but their sort of visual interpretation. That's just a visual interpretation. The problem was the plot holes in that episode. He is a god with godlike powers. Not godlike. He has powers, divine powers. He exists. He is all-knowing. He exists outside of time. He knows everything. So in that episode, when you've got him where he can't see certain things, that would tell him that this thing has worked, that they're trying to do. He would know, oh, it's worked, because I can't see into this period of time and space here. That means the plot device has worked. So to have him going, I don't know if it works or not because I can't see, is like, are you thinking through what you're writing here? Or are you still thinking about that absurd blimmin' blue sex toy subplot thing that was just pathetic? So it's like, are you thinking about this? And then when you've got this guy who knows everything, who knows, he would know that he was going to be captured or shot if he stood in front of that device. He comes out and he destroys all the guys, doesn't destroy the actual weapon itself. It was like, what are they doing? These are plot holes that don't make sense. And maybe it's just me, and I have a passion, and I've read a lot of philosophy, and particularly theistic philosophy. It's why I'm a believer in God. I think the Aristotelian and Thomistic arguments for the existence of a God are very compelling. And when you understand those arguments and how they work, you watch a show like this where they're taking those concepts and completely misappropriating them, and you're like, that doesn't hold up. Philosophically, that doesn't hold up what you're doing there. And it really, and when you're trying to be clever and trying to have this whole big, philosophical discourse about this God who is everywhere all at once, exists outside of time, therefore is all-knowing and all-powerful. Yeah, anyway. And not least of which is if he was able to be captured and killed, he's not all-knowing, he's not all-powerful. So it doesn't work. Anyway, I'm not going to get into we're not going to have a philosophy debate here. But it was frustrating. The plot holes really stood out. I think Looking Glass was that was the most compelling episode in the whole series, was where they actually told Christmas says Dr. Manhattan was Black Manta from Aquaman. That's who he was. I couldn't pick the actor. I was like, who is this guy? I've seen him in something. For some reason, Chris, your comment about Black Manta was just held in moderation by YouTube. But it's too overly sensitive, YouTube. I know you're listening. Anyway, so the Looking Glass episode, Tim Blake Nelson's character of Looking Glass, where they told his backstory, that was the most compelling episode, I thought. It was actually interesting. He was an interesting character, and he'd struggle, and it was like, yeah, this is actually interesting. And then they move on. I thought that was the most compelling episode of the whole thing. Adrian Veidt, of course, Jeremy Irons. I mean, he threw himself, and I imagine Jeremy Irons was probably loving being back in a sort of big budget television series. He probably thought, this is great. He's an actor. He's a really good actor, Jeremy Irons. And so I still think of Christmas movies. Speaking of Christmas movies, Die Hard. Die Hard 3. But Jeremy Irons is a good actor. And he really, he threw himself into this role. And you got that sense he was really relishing this role. And he did. He threw himself into it, and he was an interesting aspect of it, I thought. But here's the biggest problem with Watchmen, is that Angela Abar, she's too overpowered. She's another Mary Sue character who's been written into a show where she's supposed to be the central character, and you never feel drama, you never feel tension, you never feel danger for this character. And so there's no drama. It's hard to get invested. Her personal struggles are not personal struggles. She spends almost all of this series, she spends saving or lecturing to people or figuring out what the problem is and then solving the problem. She fixes everything. She saves everyone. And when she's not doing that, she's lecturing people and putting them right and telling them what they're getting wrong, because, she's got it all sorted out. That she is so powerful that, the hint, obviously, at the end of the season is that she has been given the godlike powers. It's probably that's what's happened. I think it is. She has been given those God, even though they leave it open-ended. Did she walk on water? Well, remember Dr. Manhattan in the previous episode, 2 episodes before, where he'd said to her, remember that, he's walking on water on the swimming pool, and he says, remember this, it's going to be important later on. So it seems pretty clear that they handed off the god powers to her. Like, she was too overpowered. And so for me, there's lots of compelling and interesting characters around her, but she was the least compelling character in the show where she is the main character. And it was so hard. This thing was just, it just didn't deliver, I don't think. And it just shows that if you interfere with the formula too much, it's not going to work. Ghostbusters 2016 doesn't work if you interfere with the formula too much. It just doesn't work. The new Star Wars has interfered too much with the formula, the storytelling basics. And I know Alan Moore would almost certainly be mortified by what they've done here with this, I think. He's a bit quirky at the best. He's a bit quirky and angry about his original content at the best of times, his own creations. But yeah, I don't blame him with this one. The Watchmen TV series just failed to deliver. Just failed to deliver. Lastly, but not leastly, Rise of Skywalker. You've seen my review. You know how I feel about it. Someone asked me earlier, how would I rate Rise of Skywalker? To me, it's not, I don't think it's worse than Attack of the Clones. People saying it's worse than Attack of the Clones. I don't think Phantom Menace is better than this film. It is down the bottom of the pile, though, of bad Star Wars films. The people who have said this is probably the best that they could do, they tried, but they failed, but they were handed a hospital pass by Rian Johnson with what he did with The Last Jedi. I think that's probably a reasonably fair summation. They've done all they could do, but they made a mess of it still. They still made a mess of it. Bringing back the Emperor, did they really need to do that? Some might say it's probably the only thing they could do. I don't know. I actually don't. What JJ could have done was they could have said, well, maybe now we've got no choice but to end this on a more muted note and a more personal note. So let's make it more about the personal struggle between Kylo and Rey and figure out how to write a bit more of a compelling story instead of going for the big spectacle. Once Snoke's gone, your big spectacle ending has really been written off at that point. And so, but they were still focused on the big spectacle as the solution. And so they had to bring the Emperor back if they were going to do that. But it was a mess. He should never be back. He shouldn't be back. He's not back. He's not back. I don't buy into it. I'm not accepting that as canon. And to me, it's like it's a bit childish. It's not. It's about I think having a regard and respect for authentic mythology. Here's 2 things that I want to say. Jose said to me, "Did you watch Red Letter Media Review?" I haven't yet. I saw it pop up before. I haven't had a chance to. After that, when I get back from the swimming and doing all the yard work this afternoon, I might try and sit down and take a little break and actually watch their review, and because it'd be interesting to hear what they have to say. Here's 2 things that I will add to the Rise of Skywalker debate and where things are at. Rey was given all of Luke's stuff, and that I thought that was such an odd choice. Even when you think about everything else, the fact that they gave Rey, they give him the X-Wing, they give her the X-Wing, which is flying. I don't even know how it's flying. That doesn't make any sense. The X-Wing, so they give her the X-Wing. They give her a whole lot of powers that even Luke and Yoda and others didn't have. They overpower her, which is just absurd. All spectacle, all show and no go, baby. That's what it was. She's got the X-Wing. She's got his helmet. They even give her the homestead of his Anakin's half brother's homestead. They give the lightsabers. it's weird, and it was such a clunky way to do a handover, but it was so pointless too, because it's at the end of the trilogy. Why like, if you hand something over to someone in a storytelling arc like this, the whole point of handing over a legacy is so the person will then carry on with the legacy. They handed the legacy to her at the end, and she just put, literally, ironic metaphor, she buries it in the ground. It's like, yeah, that's what you've just done here. You've given this awful, unceremonious burial to this legacy. It didn't. I mean, if you're going to do that, you do that at the beginning. But the whole thing's a mess. The Force Awakens was just, it's a big rip-off of A New Hope. And so you start out there. Where do you go from there? They should have. I'm actually going to set myself a challenge. I won't give away too much now, but I'm actually going to try and sit down and figure out, if I get a spare couple of hours these holidays, figure out, how would you write a trilogy if you didn't write this one? What's a better way to do this? But yeah, it's they made a mess of it. And then, of course, what Rian Johnson did put them in the hole. And then this was sort of the end result of all of it. The other thing too that I didn't talk about in my review, but this is actually important when you think about it, is the fact that they put that Reylo moment in there. That was, I would argue, especially from a group of people who are so politically motivated, that was a very dysfunctional thing to do. Because the relationship between Rey and Kylo is not a romantic relationship in the slightest. He is all but an abusive stalker of this woman. He wants her dead. He is like an abusive ex-husband or an abusive boyfriend who's actually, you have to take a restraining order against. And then she kisses him, willingly embraces the guy and kisses him at the end. And when he gave his life for us, he saved her. I mean, she didn't know he was dying at that stage, did she? Remember? She thought, I'm back, and he's here, and oh, wow, let's have a kiss. Two things about that. It was weird when you think about the dysfunctional nature of their relationship. It was so weird and not a good, I don't think it's a good thing at all. And secondly, even if you put that aside and you say, oh, but he saved her, it was like, what? It just all sort of suddenly happened. Next thing, she's in love with him. It was so superficial. It's like the worst of the worst in those sort of rom-coms and stuff where they don't have a good understanding of love. It's all feelings based. And by the way, that was one of the things I really noticed about this film too that I didn't talk about in my review. It has a very, very modern take on discernment and decision making, and it's grounded so much in feelings. Now, Star Wars always had that thing of search your feelings, but remember, Star Wars also had the counterbalance that feelings could betray you, and if you let anger and other things take over an emotion, that would betray you. This film was really heavy on the whole feelings. It was all about the feels. And so I'm kind of not surprised that she wakes up and has the feels and then just kisses this dude, because it doesn't make any logical sense, and it's not a particularly virtuous or good thing, a prudent thing for someone to be doing in that situation. Just isn't, right? But it's very superficial. It's like those rom-coms with their superficial take on love. It's not authentic. And if you try to live a relationship that way, that's the perfect recipe for how you end up with an absolute disaster. Your relationship will either fail because it's not grounded in anything substantial or meaningful, like a willingness to suffer and journey with this person in suffering and still keep loving them even when it's not easy to love them. That's not part of the rom-com mythos. The rom-com culture is one of everything's perfect and happy, and you find that perfect person and they're just perfect, and you're perfect, and it's all perfect, and everything happens, and nothing bad will ever happen. That's what this was sort of wrapped in, that kind of bow. So your relationship will either fail miserably, because that's not what the real world's like, or you'd end up with an abusive psycho who would be a predator, and you go, this person is so naive that I can take advantage of them because they think that rom-coms are real, and that's how you end up with an abusive psycho. So yeah, it had that kind of vibe to it, but that was two things I just wanted to add that I didn't talk about in my review. So they're giving all of Luke's stuff to Rey. And the relationship between Rey and Kylo is an extremely dysfunctional one. So to add a kiss to the end of that was like, what is this? It's just it is. Yeah, I can't imagine any other situation where you'd do that and have it A, make sense, and B, be a good thing. Okay, that's all I want to say about anything and everything. I'm opening the floor now for a few more minutes before we wrap. This is a good. What a great Christmas Eve stream this has been. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing this. It's almost 2 hours of Christmas Eve streaming today. And if you're watching this belatedly, I hope you're enjoying it as well. One thing I will say, actually, I was thinking about this yesterday. Everyone's going about Star Wars as a kids' movie. And remember Chris Stuckman a couple of days ago made those comments. We can't blame anyone for this. And it's one of the big reason here is that when we were kids, we saw things differently, and now our world view's different now as adults. I think that's what he was trying to say there. Not that our world views have changed. And so just in general, I think he means that, in fact, that we've matured a bit. And so our view of things has changed. But in actual fact, that's not a valid argument when you think about it, because I'm a mature adult and my worldview has definitely changed over a lot of the stuff I watched when I was a kid. But here's the thing, there are still classics that I still watch and I can still look at and say, yeah, that was a really good film, or that was a great story, because it was a well-told story. There are other things from my childhood that I look at now and I go, oh, that was awful. When I was a kid, obviously I liked it because I was a kid and didn't know any better, but now, But Star Wars, the original trilogy, still holds up. That's the point, and that's what he's missed there. Not everything is automatically bad just because you suddenly mature into adulthood. If it's a good, well-told story, it will journey with you and stay with you. That's why people still keep reading Lord of the Rings from childhood through to adulthood, because it is a very, very well-told story that touches on the profound truths about the human experience, and it stays with you from childhood to adulthood. The Last Jedi is not. This is not a matter of saying, well, if we were kids, we'd buy into this and maybe we would embrace nostalgia and we'd still love it. Is that? No, you wouldn't. You'd mature and you'd go, what is this garbage? Already my own kids have said to me, when they found out that the Emperor's back, they were like, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. They haven't even seen the movie yet. And I haven't tainted it, because I don't do that. I'm not going to taint it for them. I'm not going to tell my kids that, oh, this is bad, you shouldn't watch it. I'll let them make up their own mind. If the content's not good for children, or it's full of nonsense propaganda, I'm not going to expose them to it as a parent. That would not be a loving action on my part. But I'm not going to, if it's just a movie and it's a taste thing, I'm not going to say, oh, kids, you should agree with everything Dad says. I'm not going to. I want them to think for themselves. But they haven't seen the film. Before they've even seen it, they were like, this is dumb. What's the Emperor doing back? They knew. The kids. My eldest is only 12. My youngest is only just turned 4, and she didn't get it. But my 7-year-old boy, even he was like, what's the Emperor doing back? So anyway, what a great Christmas tree. It's been a great year. Just to let you know, while those comments are flying in, someone's asked me, Sheen and the Rats. It says, are you planning to go and see Cats? with a ha-ha on the end. No, I'm not. I said last night on Twitter, Cats, the biggest problem with Cats is that it was made several decades too late. I remember Cats, the musical, when it got released. I remember the hype, and it peaked. It got released when I was a kid, and it peaked when I was in my early teens. That was the peak of Cats. The 1990s, the early 90s was when it peaked. You do not release a Cats movie in 2019 and think that this is going to fly. This is not like Les Mis. It is not like The Phantom of the Opera, which was a much better quality musical that had a timeless character to it. This was a very time period specific event. And if you make a film and try and capitalize on that decades after the peak has happened, you get what you've got here. And it's not, and the real problem is not the creepy, weird face CGI. That's not the real problem. The real problem is that the magic has gone. Cats was a lightning in a bottle musical, and you're not gonna recapture that lightning now. You are just not. It's just not going to work. So, it was one of those things that came and went, and history has moved on from that. So yeah. Not going to watch. It's not going to be a winner for people. Just to let you know, sorry, before I get into some more of these questions, what's going to be happening over the next few weeks. Obviously, it's Christmas tomorrow. Well, it is in this part of the world anyway. Some of you are a little bit behind. You still haven't even got to Christmas Eve yet, but Merry Christmas in advance to everyone. I hope you have a really blessed and happy Christmas and a good one. We're going to travel. We've got a little bit of stuff we need to take care of in the North Island of my country, so we're on the road, hitting the road New Year's Eve. So there's not going to be a live stream next week on New Year's Eve because we will be on the road with a carload of kids and a big long journey ahead of us. So so we'll be on the road. But I'm hoping where we're going to initially, there's going to be, all things being equal, there's supposed to be Wi-Fi and everything, and it's pretty solid. So so I'm going to take some gear with me, and I'll try and do a live stream next week, but it'll be probably the Wednesday or even Thursday of next week, so a couple of days after when it normally happens. So some parts of the world today is Monday. Right now is a Monday, so it'll be probably happening on the Tuesday or the Wednesday for you. And we'll if I can make it happen, I'll still try and do that. Otherwise, there will be a little bit of a break where there won't be a live stream, and they'll just be a bit more fun, a bit more lowbrow. So that's going to be happening. I'm sure there'll still be plenty to talk about, and I might even try and make a little montage video of our trips around the place. Post that at some point. Gotta have a montage. So we'll. We'll do that. I might even take the old guitar with me. Yeah, maybe I should write a song about Rey. A song about Rey and Kylo and their love for each other. You know? He tried to kill me, but I still love him. He's been hunting me down across the galaxy, but I still want to kiss this man. Oh, will you marry me, Kylo? Oh no, this ain't gonna work, cause he died in my arms. So maybe I'll write a song about Kylo and Rey. Give it some more thought than that. Yeah. When is my album dropping? Oh, I think I just dropped my album. Here we go. We might drop out temporarily, folks. Apologies for this. Just give me 2 seconds here. There's nothing like plugging in your camera device, and then forgetting to plug in your camera device and getting a low battery water. So there we go. It's good to know that that I can do a whole live stream on battery only, because I'm rushing around and not plugging things in properly. So yeah, that's what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. But I will still make an effort. Sorry for those we just dropped out there. There was a Wi-Fi problem. When that dropout happened just before. That's what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. And let me get into some of these questions and comments. And again, let me just say, as we do this, huge thank you to everyone who supported the channel this year, and super chats, and made donations on PayPal, and supported through Subscribestar and Patreon. You guys are awesome. It allows me to keep doing this. Yeah, you're awesome. So thank you so much for that. Let's have a look at some of these questions. Jeremy Coleman. I thought it was Jeremy Corbyn. What's he doing here? He also disliked the Rise of Skywalker. He probably would have loved it. Destruction of the final Brexit order or something. John Lyons says, the relationship between Leia and Han is the high watermark in all of Star Wars. Nothing comes close, and everything in the next 2 trilogies was so robotic and charmless. Yeah, it was, because they tried to make it to formula. That's what happens. They tried to repeat a formula. Formulas don't work. You know, you've got to tell stories. You can't do formulas. And if you're going to tell a story, the only formula you want is good storytelling formulas. You don't want formulas as the story. Where are we? Palanakui, is it Palanakui? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Says, I would love Kylo to survive and Rey bringing him to the after party as her boyfriend. Imagine that. Everyone's like, this is kind of awkward. Who's that guy that you're with? It's just my boyfriend. That would be gold. Oh man, not as a Force Ghost, but he's really here. Nigel Jones says, breaking news out of Hollywood, Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams to join forces to remake the Star Wars Holiday Special. And that's the thing too. This is the other point I was going to make about Star Wars nostalgia. A lot of people try and claim we're blinded by Star Wars nostalgia. And that's what, the original trilogy was actually not as good as you remember it. And it's all the nostalgia and you're overhyping it. And then you compare this new one and you're an adult and you see the faults in the new one and it's, but if you looked fairly as an adult at the old trilogy, you realise it's overrated, it's overhyped. Again, I would say, well, that's not true because we all know that the holiday special was garbage. Everyone knows that. The most diehard original trilogy fans know that it was garbage. They don't look at it through nostalgia goggles and go, oh, no, it was great. There was we got some amazing, I really loved the additions and the backstories that we got. That cartoon with Boba Fett, that was, no one hypes that up. Everyone says that was rubbish. The Ewok movies, remember those Ewok films? Everyone knows that they were just cash grabs, and no one talks about the greatness of the Ewok movies. No, despite the fact that they came out when we were kids at that same time. So it's not a nostalgia goggles thing at all. It's the fact that the original trilogy, despite its flaws, was good storytelling and good mythological storytelling. And what's come subsequently has failed that test. Matthew Sarazin says, Disney space conflict movie summed up in one word, superficial. That's it, Matt. That's it. It is. It's vacuous superficiality. And here's the thing. We live in the age of vacuousness where people mistake, just because you say a few emotive sounding things, because we're very feels driven. It's all about the feels and emotion. I've been reading The Coddling of the American Mind recently. And they talk about this, the fragile generation who have been raised to believe that their feelings are the most important discernment tool, and they're not. And so people now mistake, just because people say some emotive things, they think, wow, this is deep. Because they haven't really heard deep and profound, or they're not really necessarily reading deep and profound things. And so they hear a speech in a movie or they see something that's got a bit of emotion attached and they go, wow, it's so deep. It's like, that's not what depth is. And so we mistake very superficial things all the time now for depth. Daniel writes, it's supposed to be a space opera. That's true. May the Pulp be with you says, I missed all of your movie catch-up. Did you see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? No, I have not seen it yet. As I said earlier, mate, I'm going to try and rent it the next couple of days while we've got a bit of downtime and rent it. And so actually, maybe next live stream, we'll talk about what I think about that. Thunder says, yeah, there's plenty of movies I liked as a kid I can't stand now. Daniel writes, says, my young one is ticked off. He said the same thing yours did. Jose said, did you watch The Boys on Amazon? I know there was some controversy. I haven't seen The Boys. And I apologize. I'm a father. I've got kids. And so my priorities with my family. I run my own charitable organization that I set up and it sort of funds my work and keeps me paying the bills and everything else. And I travel a lot. So I'm a committed dad and so I just don't have time to sort of sit there and consume. So I'm very selective in what I watch and what I even have time to watch. So no, I haven't seen The Boys. Sorry, I haven't. It's not something that's come across my radar at all. But if you want to tell me more about it, happy to. If people think it's something that I should maybe look at and review. John Lyon says, Merry Christmas, still the 23rd here in Scotland. John, have you heard Gavin McGuinness talking about the two types of Scottish people that you find in a pub? I've got some Scottish ancestry, by the way. I am a Malone, which is Irish. So we've got Irish lineage, and that's quite strong. But I've also got McDermott on my the other side of the family. There's McDermott, and we on that side of the family, we are a direct relation to Rob Roy McGregor. There's a McGregor connection that's quite you can chart it directly through our family thing. So there's a little bit of the Scotsman in me, and. I used to have this joke that I would tell everyone about the Scotsman who went to see his friend and he was stripping the wallpaper. He's pulling all his wallpaper off. And he says to him, oh, you're redecorating. And he says, no, I'm moving house. Anyway, Gavin McGuinness has got this bit that he does about the two types of, someone says, am I in New Zealand? Yeah, I'm in New Zealand. The two types of Scotsmen that you meet in a Scottish pub. One is the Scotsman who claims credit for everything. And he says that everything was invented by a Scotsman. And the other one is the Scotsman who's a bit of a conspiracy theorist who says spooky. Have you ever noticed? Spooky. Sorry, mate, it just reminded me of that when you said that. But yeah, happy 23rd, not quite Christmas Eve there in Scotland, mate. Are you in the Highlands or the Lowlands? Watch out for Muppets on the road. Yeah, we would definitely do that. Jeremy Coleman says, you're awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. My kids think so too, when I'm not embarrassing them. I'm gonna do something. I think next year I might take them to school for the first day. I might dress up as Harry Potter or something so absurd, but really bad version of Harry Potter. Make them all hug me goodbye. Come on, give your dad a hug. I keep threatening to do it, and they're like, Dad, you won't do that. And I was like, yeah, I will. I absolutely will. I mean, I've earned this. I have earned this. I've been waiting for my entire life for this moment. And I want to create memories that you will look back on with fondness. Have you seen Stranger Things 3, says Kyle. I haven't actually yet, Kyle. I haven't. I saw 1 and 2. Stranger Things 3, I got off Netflix, dumped Netflix for a couple of reasons, and well, they were funding Planned Parenthood abortion court actions. I was like, no thanks, you're not having my money to do that. So I ditched them, so I haven't had a chance to see Stranger Things 3 yet. And I sort of feel a little bit now, like time-wise as well, been a busy year, but also has that boat sailed, that train left the port? I don't know. What do people think? Thunder says, Hull is my family's link to Scotland. John says you're a racist. Please, I tried not to be a racist. Please don't cancel me. Nigel says, McDonald clan. Oh, the McDonald clan. The McDonald clan, we love your burgers. More racism. That trailer was so epic. Jeremy says, I'm a Highlander. But Jeremy, there can be only one. Is Sean Connery your favourite James Bond? My name is Bond, James Bond. Do you like Sean Connery? Is he your favourite? He must be. Here we go. John says, I'm near Lanark, which, is it Lanark? Is that how you say it? Probably in thick Scottish accent. Lanark, which was the place Mel Gibson destroyed when they killed his wife. In Braveheart. Classic. Is it Lanark or Lanark? No, it must be. You tell me. Braveheart. What a great film. That is a great film. I'm constantly saying aye. Luke Appleberry says, is the Rise of Skywalker as politicized as the other movies? No, it's not, Luke, actually. There's still that strong sort of undercurrent there, but it's not as... The thing that stuck out for me was and I see this in my review, there's this weird overabundance of female fighters now in this film. It stuck out more than any of the other ones. And why it was so noticeable was it's not just on the rebel side, the resistance, but also the stormtroopers. You keep hearing female stormtroopers now, and I think it was a deliberate decision, but it doesn't work. It's weird. Like, even everyone knows this. This is just basic human nature. This is basic reality. That your warrior class is always going to be predominantly male. And when we have the exceptions, they prove the norm. So when you have someone like Queen Boudica, who's this brutal queen in the Celts, and Boudica leads these very brutal and successful warring parties. But they're sort of the exception, not the norm, and they prove the rule. And you know that your warrior class is going to be predominantly populated by males because they're the ones full of the testosterone, and especially in the First Order, where they're supposed to be all brutal psychos anyway, it's more likely that they would be the males who'd be in the front lines doing all the killing. It's just how it works. So it's sort of stuck out. It's just odd. But they don't keep talking politics, if you like, and there's no, like The Last Jedi, it was a bit more pronounced. There's a same-sex kiss in the final thing, which I thought was not only was it absurd, literally it's like, hey, look at us. We're diverse. It was like, honestly, but it's like, if you think that that's what counts for something, you will buy anything. It's a consumerism sort of based marketing ploy. It's called the pink dollar. A lot of gay activists talk about this, actually. The pink dollar, which is where you try and appear gay friendly because you're a corporation, you want people to buy your product. That's all that is. And it had no place in Star Wars either. It's so out of context, and it's literally just jammed in there, ham-fisted. If you're someone who wants your children to have a childhood and not to be bombarded with adult concepts and things before their time, then straight away that's going to be a huge turn-off for you. I mean, after telling us this was a kids' movie, it's a kids' movie, it's a children's movie, it's for kids, it's all about space wizards, right? We hear that over and over again, and then all of a sudden now it's not. You know, it's like, well, make up your mind. What is it? But yeah, it's not that overt politicized stuff that you would, Katie Robinson says, the fighters seem to be 70% female. Katie, I think you have internalized misogyny. The fact that you would make that comment says to me you have internalized misogyny, which we should write a song about, actually. Misogyny, misogyny, I think I've got misogyny. Oh, doctor, please, cure me of my misogynies. There's a song for you. They did seem to be you're right, Katie, it was like way too many. And it really stuck out. It was like, this is now pandering. It's not organic. It's all of a sudden now in this film, everyone is female. It's like, what's going on? I guess all the guys were killed off, says Katie. They were all dead. There's no one left in the galaxy. The other thing I noticed was interesting was the whole concept of people fighting for their families and things like that, which you sort of had felt like an undertone in Star Wars. The previously, it sort of feels that's missing there as well. It is really these films are a movie for their age in all the wrong ways. Here we go. Rey is a goddess now. Yeah, I mean, she is Space Jesus. She's doing things that she absolutely should not be able to do. She's so overpowered in this film. Hold on. Sorry. I'm getting a low battery warning, and I shouldn't be getting a low battery warning. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Man, we're going from strength to strength today. Plugged it in before, didn't turn on the power. Hi, tech support, how can I help you? She's overpowered. She's way too overpowered. She is like Space Jesus, and that Mary Sue problem has just got worse in this film. It's got bad. You're seeing Wedge again. That was quite classic. I was like, is that Wedge? He's back. The other one was that Dame Judi Dench as a stormtrooper. I don't. Onto Evis says, is it Onto Evis says, I don't think Disney tried to correct anything. Every moment they covered up something. It felt like they were swindling me. Yeah, and I honestly, this movie really felt like a bad exercise in corporate creation, where what you do is you say, okay, we've got to sell this thing. How do we sell it? Like, you get a group of people in a room and they're like, everyone's angry. They don't like what we're doing. Quick, John, change it up. Do something now. Make it different. JJ, help us. And so they get together in a committee and they're like, they were all going about Raylo, put a kiss in there. And they hated that Rian Johnson thing with the lightsaber. So have Luke catching the lightsaber. They said she has to have training. Put some training in there. It was like literally just throwing things at a wall. It really did feel like they're chucking everything at the wall, seeing what would stick. And not only they were chucking everything at the wall to see what would stick, they chucked way too much at the wall. I mean, Jackson Pollock didn't throw this much stuff at a wall, but they did. They're just chucking stuff at the wall, and it's like, hopefully some of this sticks. Luke Appleberry says that this trilogy, in my opinion, should have been more about Kylo. His character was my personal favourite, but it felt neglected in terms of growth. Yeah, I agree. And funnily enough, I think the character of Kylo and Ben Solo should have been different. I think Ben Solo should have actually been the Luke Skywalker successor, but he was a Luke Skywalker successor who didn't really, he didn't necessarily want it. I think that's what they should have done with him. He was someone who felt this thing like an obligation. It was like, that would have been an interesting story to tell. Someone who's now carrying the burden of the Skywalker name and this family lineage, but doesn't feel that either they A, live up to it and are capable of it, or B, they don't necessarily want it. Like Luke embraced it. He ran to this thing. He ran to this calling. He wanted. But what about a guy who's like reluctant and who doesn't want it? And that's what creates the internal struggle. And that's what turns him to the dark side. He's so susceptible. Like that would have been much more interesting. And then you introduce Rey. What Rey could have been was Rey could have actually been a Sith character. That would have been a main Sith villain. But actually develop her properly as well. Yeah, like there's so much they could have done if they just stopped and thought creatively for a minute. Luke says, last night I watched a compilation of Mark Hamill dropping subtle hints that this Star Wars was not the same. Yeah, and some not so subtle, right? Observer Dude says, I think the fundamental problem with Disney Star Wars is it can't seem to move past the original trilogy and tell fresh stories and go in a different direction. I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that is a problem. It's not even so much they can't move past the original trilogy. It's that they keep trying to tack everything onto the original trilogy. If they could stay within, like, look, think about Rogue One. Rogue One is within the original trilogy, but it doesn't feel like they've just tacked on to something else. They've told something. It's got imperfections for sure, but they've told what I think is a largely compelling story about self-sacrifice, and it's good mythology in the midst of that, and they've connected it to that. But it doesn't just feel tacked on. It actually feels like something of some storytelling substance. Palanuiki says, so Rey's going to kill Palpatine, so he tells her to kill him, so she doesn't kill him, but in fact she kills him, but nothing happens because he killed himself because he doesn't know how to stop throwing lightning, the one thing he should have learned from Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, and this is the thing I was saying the other day too, with the character of Rey. Even Palpatine was not a Mary Sue. Palpatine was all-powerful and he's this Machiavellian character. Remember, he almost died at the hands of Samuel L. Jackson. He almost died. He was seriously disfigured. But none of that affects Rey. It's weird. Very weird. The Knights of Ren should have been bounty hunters. The Knights of Ren, what a letdown that was, man. Talk about overhyped. The Knights of Ren. And it's like, these are just dudes from the Middle Ages with pieces of iron in their hands. What are they? My friend went to see episode 9 yesterday. He told me that more than half of the theatre was empty. He watched the IMAX version. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the final numbers pan out. Like, I'd say this one, I haven't seen anything, so I don't know. Others might have seen, they can correct me, but I suspect it's going to be sort of, there's the initial hit and then it'll be a big drop off, I'd say. It won't hang around like the other films have. Jose says, the biggest disappointment was none of the original 3 felt like their counterparts. We left at the end of Return of the Jedi. Yeah, like you said before, JJ hacked Han Solo and Ryan hacked Luke. They really did. It destroyed the original character arcs, and it felt so abusive in a sense of like they just used and abused someone else's creation for their own selfish end, and then they just ditched them when they couldn't. You know, I've had my fun, and that's all that matters. You know, it was just. Yeah, it was just bad. It was like, create something new in the world, create a new and compelling character and tell a good story. Stupid Knights of Ren, Monty Python, says Kaya. We are the Knights of Ren. Dun, dun, dun. And like, honestly, it was so bizarre. And you consider they were so hyped up in the first one. It was this big thing. I thought they were all supposed to be Force users. And who are the Knights of Ren? Does anybody know who they are? I thought they were supposed to be fellow pupils that joined him. But maybe I was hoping for too much there. Sean says, yes, R1 was the only decent Star Wars movie from the mouse. Yeah, Rogue One, and it was. Look, it's got its faults. Saw Gerrera is underdeveloped and not properly utilised in that film. But that's because of here's the thing about the film that's so amazing. They bring in that screenwriter who does all the reshoots, another Kathleen Kennedy classic. Everyone says, was it Gareth Edwards? They're like, Gareth Edwards made an amazing film. He didn't. Gareth Edwards made a final version of the film where they had to bring in the new writer, quite an experienced screenwriter. He comes and goes, oh my gosh, this is a mess. That's right, I read an interview with him. He said it was a mess. So he had to rewrite stuff. They did reshoots. They chopped it to bits. And clearly you can see that he couldn't fix everything because there are bits of that. The Bull Gully, or was it the Bull Gullet? I don't know. It sounded like the accent kept changing. But the Bull Gully, the mind-reading slug creature, it's like, why is this even in here? This whole thing is such a pointless distraction. It does not serve the plot at all. And there were much better ways. You don't need to have his mind wiped. He can just be sitting in a cell the Imperial pilot, and they look over and see him. Oh, it's you. That's all they need. They did not need any of that stuff. It didn't serve any purpose. It was so dumb. And so there's some stuff that sort of, and Saw Gerrera is one of those characters, when he dies at the end, and he pulls out his breathing apparatus, and he stands there as a big tsunami of rock waves sort of crashes over him. And it's like, what's the point of this? He's just committing suicide. There's nothing heroic about this. He's not saving anyone. He's just giving up. It was so weird. What they should have had with his character was he should have got into his ship, and there should have been a very brief chase when they left the planet. Perhaps some TIE fighters or something, and the only way to save Jyn and her band of heroes and to allow them to complete the mission was for Saw Gerrera to sacrifice himself, to put his ship in harm's way, because let's say their guns weren't working or his guns weren't working or something, and so the only way to do it was for him to get between them and the enemy, and he's destroyed. And then that would have been an actual self-sacrifice, and his character would have actually sort of had a bit more to do in that film and would have made a bit more sense. But other than that, the actual substance of that film, there's a lot there to like. It's a good story about self-giving, and it actually works overall. In the final ending and conclusion to the film, it wraps up really, really well. Kyle says the pilot never lost his mind either. It was this whole thing, the Borgullet, you'll lose your mind. And he doesn't. He just loses his memory for a few seconds. What is this? Sean says, I heard Gareth Edwards had a different cut. KK canned that cut. He had to change a lot. That's what we got in the end. But apparently for the better, because I read an article with the screenwriter, who's actually an experienced screenwriter, who's worked on some good movies. And he said the original cut was a mess. It wasn't good. And so it sounds like that was actually one of those good decisions. But the bad decision was, why would you put a director allow something to go so long? And this is another one of those Kathleen Kennedy hiring decisions, where you hire someone, you put someone who's not really up to the job, and you keep hiring and firing people. That's not good decision making. It just isn't. Yoda, Christmas says Yoda, Obi-Wan, Luke, Qui-Gon, Jyn, Mace Windu, Darth Vader, Darth Maul, and the Emperor all combined would be no match. They wouldn't be, right? And that's the absurdity. It was like, why is she so overpowered? And the only thing I can think of is, there's only two options here. They don't care about good storytelling. They just don't care. They're literally painting by numbers in the most simplistic way possible. We need a character who can be a toy and who can do amazing cartoonish things. That's all we want. Sean, thank you for that $10. Thank you very, very much for that super chat. Merry Christmas to you, my friend. That'll help pay the petrol bill this year. That's good. But the only other possible reason why Rey is so overpowered is because they were so enamored with this modern, simplistic take on feminism, which is like, she must be all-powerful, and we can't have her failing anyway. She's got to prove a point. She's got to prove the point that women can be all-powerful, that women can be in Star Wars too, and they can be the heroes. And so they didn't dare do anything that would have her failing or incapable. And it just, there's the only two reasons, right? That's the only two reasons for that. And I suspect it's probably the ideology was the thing that won out. Rey should have been like an android or a humanoid robot. But think about it, Jeremy. That's not a bad idea. But here's the thing: even still, her writing would have have improved a lot. Think about Alita and Alita Battle Angel. She's an android. She's a humanoid. She's a robot character, but she still has a struggle and an arc and things she needs to learn. And her struggle really is around what she doesn't understand. She doesn't understand personhood and what it is to be a person. And then there's other struggles that come with that, that bit when she's torn to bits, like that's the kind of stuff that's all missing from Rey as a character. Not that exact stuff, but that struggle. Nigel says, time for Nigel to fly away. Best wishes to everyone from Bernie. Oh, in Tassie. Are you in Tassie, mate? Hopefully there's no fires where you are. I was in Tasmania early this year. I flew over there very brief. I was in there for I flew on Sunday night, flew to Melbourne, then caught the plane to Tasmania, climbed a mountain the next day, Dry as Bluff in Tasmania, and did some filming with a guy who's got a TV show that's coming out and sort of a commentary thing. And then I literally got off the mountain, drove back, had the world's quickest shower, went straight back to the airport and flew home. So like 5 hours back to New Zealand. So and the first time in Tasmania, I love Tassie. But Nigel, thanks for joining in. Merry Christmas, mate. Yeah, Thunder 1986 says, for Kathleen Kennedy, idea of a strong female character had to win. Nigel Jones, thank you for that early Christmas present. Thank you for that $5, that super chat. Really appreciate that, mate. As I said, that'll go in the petrol tank on our family journeys this year. Sean says, I was going to watch episode 9 today, the cheapest 2D version. Instead, I decided to donate that $10 to a channel that produces much better content. Thanks, Sean. You're a legend, mate. And we will take that money and we will continue to produce much better content. Jeremy says to me, are you Australian living in New Zealand? No, I'm a Kiwi, mate, through and through. Funny, this is everyone has confusion in other parts of the world about our accent. And some people think, Australians and New Zealanders, they're all just one big country. They think you're are you an Aussie? No, I'm not an Aussie, so I'm not an Australian. And other people think, a lot of Americans think I'm English. And people who are critical of harsh comments about me on YouTube, they're like, those up market English people, go back to Downton Abbey. I think someone said to me once in a comment. I was like, yeah, I'm not from England, but okay. So yeah, no, I'm a Kiwi, and I'm living in New Zealand. Kyle says, in Force Awakens, I was okay with Rey because she may have a good explanation for her Force powers, and Kylo was wounded in the final battle with her. Yeah, I think it wasn't quite. She was still a Mary Sue. It wasn't quite as bad as it got. It really did keep ramping up until the final film was just, man, it was a mere. But she still was too overpowered. She could do too much in The Force Awakens. The big thing for me about The Force Awakens was the two things. One is she's flying ships like a pro. She's fixing ships like a pro. She's some pro mechanic. That kind of could make sense because she's a scavenger. Maybe she's taught herself about mechanics. That could, but she's a pro mechanic, not just a bush mechanic. She's flying the ship like an ace fighter pilot. That didn't make a lot of sense. She's saving the day. More importantly, the really big thing for me that stuck out was the fact that she's too virtuous. She's a character raised in a dog-eat-dog world, and basically slave labor in a world of slaves, and she acts like a character who was raised in a monastery with this perfect life of virtue. She's a saint. Remember, the big scene for me that was a mess was when she agreed to actually save BB-8, a droid she's only just met. It's just a droid. She doesn't know anything about this droid, and she's offered all of that food, which would have meant two things. She would have met. We know already, we saw the scene previously, she's hungry, she's being ripped off by these people. She's working for slave wages. So she was offered all that food, which is like the currency, and it meant she wouldn't have needed to have worked as hard, and she could have taken all those kind of things, and she turned it down to save a droid that she's only just met. That didn't make sense for her character. Her character would have said, I'll take the food. And then this is how you do it, because I know they know this, because they did this in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian hands over the baby Yoda, which is exactly what his character should do. It's consistent with who his character is. Then he has a pang of conscience, and later on he goes back and steals back and kidnaps and saves Yoda, baby Yoda. But he hands him over in the first place because that's what he does. It's his character. He doesn't suddenly act completely out of character. And so that's what Rey should have done. She should have handed over BB-8, gone away, and then had a pang of conscience about something like the Mandalorian does, and then gone and saved BB-8. That's what she should have done, but they didn't. And so things like that were like, she's too saintly and too perfect. Kyle says, definitely a problem still in Force Awakens, especially with Han Solo. Yep, they destroyed Han Solo's character arc. His redemption arc was destroyed. He left his wife, he left his kid, he went back to a life of vice. And that was... They destroyed what was a really perfect redemption arc of that character. Why? Because J.J. Abrams wanted old Han Solo in his movie. That's the only explanation for that. This is like a marketing thing. It's like, how do we market this thing? Yeah, but they loved Han Solo. Can we get Han Solo back in here? It's like, he's left the building. No, we'll get him back. We'll just force him back into this. Sean says, is it me or is the mouse... is this mouse Star Wars never had a single decent looking lightsaber? Yeah, that's interesting. Some people have commented on some of those things around the peripheries. For me, I'm not, I think I've said this previously, I'm not a uber Star Wars nerd. So for me, it's not about all the the tech and the lore, and I mean, I love that stuff, but it was never about those things as the primary thing. For me, it was about the mythology. Star Wars told a great mythology about authentic human touchstones, which is what good mythology is about, and it told it well. And so that's the thing that's gutted and missing from. I mean, they can have average technology, but with good mythology, this new trilogy could be really, really good, but it's not. It's missing that. That Sith dagger looked like something made from a model kit. Yeah, I agree. It was so weird, and it was, when you think about it, this is the thing. You're not supposed to think too hard about this either, because why? Why is the Sith dagger even a thing? Like as a tool for finding. How does the Sith dagger exist? Think about this concept. You hold up this dagger, which has the exact rugged edges and ragged edges of that damaged piece of Death Star. And it's been modelled exactly on, what is that? In a universe full of technology and magical sorcery powers, why would that be a good way of doing anything? This is not consistent with the world building of that universe. Secondly, when did they do that? Who created that exact? It's a damaged piece of the Death Star. Did someone go there to Endor and map it out exactly and say, and there we go, I've 3D printed it. It's so weird. This doesn't make a lot of sense as a tool. It's just so weird. But that's the thing about this. You're not supposed to think. You're not supposed to just switch off your brain and just consume. Imagine what this could have been. This is my big thing. How do you fix Star Wars now? I'm planning to do a video on this, probably to talk about this, maybe in the new year. But I think what you do, again, get Christopher Nolan involved. Give him whatever he wants. Give Christopher Nolan what he wants, and you also get Weta Workshop involved. Weta Workshop, I think still led by Richard Taylor, I think. But he was very involved, obviously, when they were doing Lord of the Rings. Get those guys, Peter Jackson's production company, Weta Workshop, and get them involved with the world building. And I'll tell you why. Go and watch King Kong, and then go and read the articles about. In fact, they put out a whole book, illustrated book of the world building of King Kong around that movie. And it's astounding. And it's fascinating. In fact, get King Kong, the making of documentary. It's probably on YouTube. Watch it. Where Richard Taylor is talking about all the world building they did. They created a whole entire anthropology for that, for the island in King Kong, in Peter Jackson's King Kong. And they had this whole backstory mapped out, and they created illustrations and then evolutionary history for the creatures and everything. And you only saw the tip of the iceberg on screen. You didn't see any of that. They didn't show you that in the movie. But the reason that's there is so that what you see on screen is just this amazing world building. That's the kind of commitment you need in a Star Wars film. So get those guys involved in the world building for your new trilogy, and get Nolan to write the thing. Jeremiah says, good point, especially since she's Palpatine's granddaughter. Where did Palpatine have kids? Don't think. Look into my eyes. Not around my eyes. Look into my eyes. You were getting sleepy. This is the best movie you've ever seen. Also, has anybody else noticed the fact that Rotten Tomatoes still has an audience rating of 86% favorability for the Rise of Skywalker, despite the fact that the number of reviews has increased by the thousands, and it's stayed the same. It hasn't shifted. I don't know what it's like this morning, but when I checked last night, it was. That doesn't compute. That doesn't compute. Something doesn't make sense there. I mean, maybe they've got some really amazing algorithm and everyone really is positive in their reviews. I'm doubtful. That hasn't even shifted up or down by a percentage point. Not even 1 percentage point. Something doesn't quite add up there. It doesn't quite seem right. I mean, I could be wrong, and maybe I'm just too paranoid now. But it was weird. It's very weird to me. Jeremiah says, any interest in doing a vid pertaining to the mythology of Star Wars, specifically the Jedi and the mythology of real world religion? Yeah, and I think it's something that's worth exploring, because when I was a kid, this was always the interesting debate that went on around this by the sort of commentators of the day. Was there were some commentators who said, this is a really interesting, take on mythology, on mythology, and particularly in the human experience around religion and spirituality. Other commentators would say, nah, it's just a bad rip-off of Christianity married up with a bit of Eastern mysticism. And so I think there is something interesting, there's some meat there to talk about. Jose says, don't think, pretty much sums up what Red Letter Media's reviewer said of this film. Okay, that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I haven't watched their one yet. I'm going to watch that later today if I get some time. But yeah, it is. It's a matter of don't think, go in there, consume. Shadyversity, Sean says, mentioned all those positive reviewers never had any previous movie reviews and are all new accounts. It's interesting, I didn't know that. It does seem to me that people have figured out now on both sides of wherever you land on an issue, they've figured out that you can game the system. You can game the system. Rotten Tomatoes, and it's been happening on IMDb for a long time. There are movies, and you notice more specifically with low budget movies, there are lower budget movies where there is no doubt that the director, the producer, they've got all their friends and family and people who worked on the film to get on there and write positive reviews. Because there's some terrible films and it's like, what? How has this movie, got this audience score on IMDb I'm talking about? And you read these reviews and you're like, yeah, no, this is not legit. So people have, the system can be gamed. And I think people have figured out, I think Rotten Tomatoes, there's probably some gaming of the system going on too. How I Met Your Grandmother, Kylo and Rey on the couch. Oh. How's he having kids? I don't... This was the thing, and this is the thing that... Let me gather round, children, and I'll clue you in on a few little things. No, I'm not. I'm not that self-important. I'm just a clown with a YouTube channel. Palpatine is basically Lucifer in the Star Wars universe. He's Luciferian. That's the whole point. He is the great... He's like Sauron. He's the Lucifer of this world. So, if your granddad is Lucifer, you're not off to a good start in mythology. I think it was such a weird decision to make her a Palpatine. Especially when Lucifer's granddaughter, like if you're going to write Lucifer's granddaughter, she better have a really good redemption arc. Basically, or, a throwing off her past. There's none of that because she's not well written. And then to have her at the end of it taking the Skywalker name was even more bizarre. So why is she taking this name? Like I can see maybe what they were trying to get at was that Luke and Leia had effectively adopted her, or Leia had, but Leia's an Organa. But why not take the Organa name? Don't think. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I started thinking about this for a moment. I just forgot. Stop thinking. Just consume. Some of the critics' reviews said not to think too. Sad to see Star Wars has become the new Transformers. Yeah, and that's it. Even CinemaScore was the lowest of any Star Wars film. Jeremiah says, how do I get that job? It's good, 10 out of 10. Special mummy Sith hugs. Oh, special mummy daddy hugs. Oh, man. Weekend at Palpy's, folks. Weekend at Palpy's. It really was. I can't wait for the deep fake for him to have glasses and someone to add the strings. Someone will do it. It was so weird. None of it makes sense. Why is he hiding? Who's populating these Star Destroyers that are under ice? Why are they under ice? You could feel the big Lord of the Rings rip-offs, by the way, too, in this, the Exegol, the dark regions. They're really sort of trying to plumb the depths of previous mythologies that have really created sort of, what would you call it, mysticism. That was one thing I think they realised was missing, the mysticism element. Take Ben's advice from Parks and Rec. When it comes to Palpatine procreating, just don't think about it. No, you don't. I don't want to think about that at all. But it is weird. It's like, did he have a wife previously? Maybe he could have had a wife, but they were stretching. Come on. This whole thing is just stretching it at its worst. Here's what I think is going to happen, just to wrap things up with. Here's my prediction. Sorry, I got some comments come flying in. Someone says, why is it not? Sorry about that. John, your comment's been hidden. Here's what I think's going to happen. Space horsies. That's right. Space horsies on top of Star Destroyers. What is this? What am I watching here? This is just... oh, man. Yeah. I love what you've done with this film, JG, but it needs more cowbell. Like, this film was just... Everything was thrown at the wall. Here's what I think will happen. You always get this with a Star Wars film or a film of this magnitude that's got the big gravitas name and history and everything attached to it. It comes out and you get a lot of people who are caught up. They watch it with Star Wars goggles on. They will have nostalgia goggles. They will have Star Wars goggles on. I have a friend of mine, Sam. I don't know if you're watching Sam. He's a good man. I know him personally. We catch up for an ale whenever we can. He lives in Australia. But he said to me, he went into the film and he saw an advanced screening of it. He was like, yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Then the next day he was like, oh, I'm not so sure. I thought about it more. And then he said to me just the other night, he said, I watched it again. He said, I had my Star Wars goggles on and it wasn't good. And I think that's what will happen here is there's initial hype. Everyone's hyped. I fell for the prequels initially. I couldn't explain why in my gut something wasn't right. I just knew. And then as I began to think about it more, I was like, no, this is a disaster. And so I think the same thing will happen. You watch in the next month or two that the hype will have fallen away and a lot of people will have realised, oh no. So a lot of people will just stop talking about it because things that don't have substance don't tend to last in the imagination. Or you'll get people just being more honest about it. My prediction is correct though. People have suddenly become a lot more honest about the failings of The Last Jedi. Isn't that interesting? They've all of a sudden become a lot more honest about it. And I think it's a marketing ploy too, partly. And I think it's also partly because they have another movie. They're given the freedom now to talk honestly about the one that's gone before. Yeah. I mean, Rian Johnson clearly has been thrown under a bit of a bus here. He's desperately sort of lashed back, I see. Yeah. He's an interesting character, Ryan. I feel like he can't let it go. There's a lot of creative types are like this. It's hard to see your own art or your own creations criticised, and I think he's perhaps struggled to accept that and let it go. And I feel sorry for him because it must be a lot of pressure. I'm not gonna call the guy names, and everyone running around calling him. There's that nickname, is it Roundhead or something? No thanks. The movie was awful, and he hasn't conducted himself well on Twitter at times, sure. But it doesn't mean I have to join in, you know. Be a good person, be a virtuous person, take the higher moral ground and actually be a good person and don't join in the mess. And one thing that I was thinking about the other day is that you think for a guy in his position, something like that could very easily collapse on top of you. You make an artistic misstep like The Last Jedi and everyone just piles on. And it just, the weight of it crushes you. It could easily happen to someone, so I'm not going to refuse to do that. I'm quite happy to critique the film, but I'm not going to start calling the guy names just because he made a bad film. Kerry Ford says Palpatine was a good family man. Well, he was. He cared about family. You know. He had his kids killed so he could save his grand. I mean, this is a guy who loves Palpatine for mayor. Jeremy Coleman says, remember they gave an early viewing to cancer patients. Jeremy, sorry. Oh, the dark humour, gallows humour. Jeremy says, were they trying to free up beds or something? I'm sorry, mate, I shouldn't be laughing, but oh no. Here's the thing, if when my time comes, and my time will come one day, I won't be wanting to watch a Disney Star Wars film. I'll be wanting to spend it with my kids. I will be doing what St. Augustine did in the final days of his life. He locked himself away in his quarters. Knew he was dying. And he had Psalm 51 written by King David, which is that repentance psalm after David commits adultery with Bathsheba, sees her on the roof, commits adultery with her, gets her pregnant, realizes, uh-oh, she's married to another man, Uriah. And so what she does is he goes, oh, I can marry her as well. He tells the commander of his armies to put Bathsheba's husband out the front lines in the next battle and then to withdraw so the enemy will surround him and kill him. And they do. He murders the guy. And then the prophet Nathan comes to see King David, and he just bold-faced calls him out. And he says, you have done this evil thing. He tells him a story about a man in his kingdom who is a rich neighbour and a poor neighbour. And the poor neighbour just had, I think it was a goat. It was a goat or a sheep. Has this little meagre sheep or goat that he's got. And the rich neighbour's got everything, came and took it off him. And King David gets angry, says, who is this? Who's responsible for this injustice? Tell me and I'll deal with it. And Nathan says, it's you. That's what you did with Bathsheba, and you killed her husband, and rah. And so in that moment, King David is convicted for his sins, his evil that he's done, and he has this massive repentance, redemption moment, and he puts on the sackcloth and ashes, and he writes, he humbles himself, and then he writes Psalm 51, which is this beautiful psalm about sorrow and repentance, sorrow for evil, and that you've done. And so St. Augustine had Psalm 51 printed on big, massive scrolls that were placed all around his room. And he has these big scrolls of Psalm 51 printed all around his chamber, and he spends his final days, as the empire is collapsing around him, he spends his final days contemplating and meditating on his own life and his own failings. That's what I'd be doing, not watching a Disney Star Wars film. There's a roundabout way of getting to that point, wasn't it? Anyway, I think that's really all I've got. I've got to get going because I've got to go and swim. I've got to go and swim my laps. I swim 70 laps a week. So, once a week I go and swim 70 laps to try and keep my fitness up. So I'm going to go to the pool, swim my laps, and then I've got to come home and mow the lawns and put up the gazebo and do a whole lot of stuff to get ready for Christmas Day, which is tomorrow. We're hosting the family. It's been awesome. I'm not going to see you before New Year's Eve, probably on a live stream, I don't think. Thank you so much to all the support. Everyone supported the channel this year. Thank you for joining. I've loved these live streams. The tail end of the year, we've sort of got them back on track a bit, and it's been really good. I apologise it hasn't been as consistent. It's been such a busy year for me. I've had to set up my own organisation and a new thing and all the rest of it, and it's just, I've had to prioritise my time, and it just hasn't. YouTube, the advertising, the adpocalypse and stuff, it doesn't make as much revenue, so it's a lot harder to sort of put the time and effort into it. But you guys have hung in there, and that's been awesome, and there's been some great moments throughout. So Merry Christmas to everyone for tuning in. You guys are awesome. Thank you. It's been another great stream. I hope you have a blessed, holy, happy, joyous Christmas, that you get time with family. Don't forget to stop and contemplate the real meaning of Christmas, why we have Christmas, because of the birth of a humble king in a stable 2,000 years ago, but also it's a time to spend with family. It's not about consumerism, engage in a bit of self-giving. It's good for you. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting the channel. It's been a blessed year for me. You guys are awesome. I will see you, as I said, next week. It won't be on the Monday. For some of you it's Monday now, some of you it's Tuesday. It won't be the regular live stream time. We'll be on the road. Hopefully though, a couple of days after that I can get a live stream going. So you guys are awesome. See you next time on Left Foot Media. Thanks for tuning in.